in the room and get started right at 3:05, please. Okay, folks, so if we can get started again, please. Next item business is the proposed 2019-2022 term of council priorities. Does the will of the commission, do you want a presentation on that, or shall we just go to questions? Questions? Okay, thank you. First we'll do delegations. We have, I believe, two. Where'd my list go here? Thought we had two. There it is. Right here. So Mr. Jan Lamb is the first delegation. Go ahead, sir, and have a seat. After you will be Miranda Gray.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I've taken the time to review the proposed terms of council priorities that was tabled, and I note the following items relating to transit or OC Transpo. 1. Light rail transit to the Ottawa International Airport. 2. Stage 2 light rail transit project. 3. Make the O-Train Confederation line extension an integrated part of OC Transpo system. All of the above mentioned initiatives are great. In my opinion, however, what is missing from the terms of council priorities that should be on the list are a review of transit planning policy and a review of service capacity standards. During the term of council in 2010 to 2014, approximately $20 million was removed from the OC Transpo's annual operating budget. That led to route optimization in 2011, which caused route cuts, service reduction to some routes during the weekday off-peak and weekends, and the use of high-capacity buses for the purpose of doing minor frequency reductions, all of which negatively affect customers. I believe that the current policies that have led to the kind of service that we have right now, which resulted in ridership over the last 8 years to remain either stagnant or grow a lot slower because of the current service either not being convenient or requires users to walk to and from the nearest bus stop. In my opinion, as part of the council priorities, there needs to be a review of transit planning policy and service capacity standards that put transit users first. I can point out 8 examples on how bus routes and service levels were changed for the purposes of complying with policies which have negatively affected transit users, and I have those 8 examples listed in my speaking notes that I sent to Commission prior to today's meeting. There was an exchange during the November 6th Transit Commission meeting between Citizen Commissioner Anthony Cariacto and Mr. Manconi. Question from the Commissioner, quote, "Do you think we have sufficient bus service right now?" Unquote. Answer from Mr. Manconi, quote, "Mr. Chair, this is a question to Council. This is a question of if you are chasing ridership or are you chasing coverage. This is a very complicated policy discussion that Council would need to have in terms of that. That's not staff's job to set those standards. We bring you the best professional advice. 2011, you did a major overhaul of your bus service. All those policy discussion points were tabled then. Staff followed those discussion points, and so for me as a general manager to offer my view as to whether or not we have enough frequent bus service, that's not staff's job. Our job is to bring you the information for you to make that policy discussions," end quote. Given that the response to the Commissioner that it's not staff's job to set standards, I am asking the Transit Commission to do the following as part of the terms of council priorities. 1, review and change the policy regarding transit planning that guides how bus routes are created. Currently, there is a policy where off-peak service would be provided to 95% of the population within an 800-meter walking distance, and for rush hour service would be provided to 95% of the residents within a 400-meter walking distance or a 5-minute walk. I can understand and appreciate that the bus network prior to the 2011 route optimization may have exceeded the policy, but in my opinion, service prior to route optimization did provide better service to users in terms of service coverage and service levels. 2, review and change the policy regarding service capacity standards on bus route frequencies. While I do not know what the current service capacity standards are, it does guide how frequently bus routes operate, what bus types are assigned to routes, whether trips should be added or removed on a particular route, and how crowded the buses should be before action is taken. There have been examples where frequency on bus routes have been reduced through the use of high-capacity buses. A good example were what was then Route 91 and 95 beginning in late December 2017, where double-decker buses replaced articulated buses during the midday weekday, thus causing a minor frequency reduction. Essentially, they were trying to carry the same amount of passengers with fewer buses. Frequency reductions with the double-decker bus.
Mr. Lamb?
Yes?
You've got 15 seconds left. Are you
Sure.
able to wrap up on that? Thank you.
Sure. Frequency reductions with double-decker buses may have worked on connection routes, but not on busy mainline routes. In my opinion, frequency reduction through the use of high-capacity buses, whether it's a double-decker bus to replace articulated buses or articulated bus to replace standard 40 bus to carry the same amount of passengers, is, in my opinion, bad planning policy. To conclude, given the amount of feedback of bus service...
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lamb.
Okay.
You've run out of time. Now,
All right.
I see where you've submitted correspondence. Is this
Yes.
all your remarks? So we've got those remarks in writing as well?
Yep.
Okay, because I want to thank you. You raised a lot of good points there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say to you that, in my view, instead of term of council priorities, those can be priorities for the Transit Commission, that over the next year and two, that's a lot of stuff that we need to get done.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I thought this was the first available opportunity to provide that comment, so I thought I'd submit those comments right
It's very
now.
much appreciated.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions for Mr. Lamb? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Brockington has a question for you.
Just a comment to the delegate, Mr. Chair, and you've correctly pointed out, and I hope all commissioners heard, that there really is only one priority in the whole term of council priorities for the Transit Commission, and it's a big one, but as you're about to see in the next few minutes as we discuss, is whether or not we should be adding priorities to the one that we have established. So thank you for raising that.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Ms. Miranda Gray, followed by Raymond Lurie.
Hi, I'm still Miranda Gray, and I'm still a transit rider that goes from Orleans to Gatineau and does not own a car. My priorities and my answer to Councillor Brocklington is clear. Yes, you should have more priorities related to transit. It's one of our biggest expenditures, and it's one of the areas that impacts lots of people in the city. You can't run a city if people can't get around and get to their jobs, get to their health care, get to the food they need to take home. The priorities I would like you to add is to not lose focus of all of the non-LRT related things on your plate. That's OC Transpo, which you heard about this morning. It's just regular buses. It's local buses that don't connect to your LRT, plus it's your new extension of LRT. But the number one has to be tracking reliability so that users believe in the system and believe it helps them. You don't have any tracking of reliability now. You will need that. You need it as part of your master transportation plan that will be coming forward. You need data so that you can be a data-driven organization. So I would like you to have the priority of looking at more than one branch of your operations. That's Paratranspo, buses, and LRT expansion. I would put those as 4 areas that you are active in. And I would like you to become a data-driven organization by looking at the origin, destination, and seeing where people actually go.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for the presenter? No? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Raymond? Followed by Trevor Hache.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to quote from the City of Kingston's priorities for council for this term. So their first priority is demonstrate leadership on climate action. And if you read the text of their priorities, it talks about giving the economic, social, and environmental threats of greenhouse gas emissions and Kingston's 2019 declaration of climate emergency, which, by the way, the City of Ottawa also declared a climate emergency, as you recall, earlier this year. The city is committed to steward the environment for future generations. As an internationally connected city, Kingston will address this global issue as a local climate action leader and inspire Kingston residents to become part of the solution. So they have specific things that they talk about, and there's 2 of them that I want to touch on. One is reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 15% across the city's operations by 2022, okay? So just 3 years in the future. The other thing they have in there is that they will incrementally electrify the city's fleet of vehicles, including public transit. And actually, they had a motion at council yesterday to buy 2 electric buses, and they're proceeding with that project. So what I would like to see, given the fact that we have declared a climate emergency and it's undisputable that we are in a time where we need to reduce greenhouse gases, I'd like to see more specific numbers from the City of Ottawa in terms of council priorities over this term of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you very much for your delegation. Very much appreciate it. Next up is Trevor Hache, and maybe while Trevor's making his way to the microphone, if staff could answer something for me. The delegation mentioned about reducing greenhouse gases. How much did the LRT reduce our greenhouse gas output? I'm giving you a chance to do a commercial here. No? Okay. How about after the delegation then? That's okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hache.
So I'd like to request the indulgence of the Transit Commission members and ask fairly last minute for 2 additions to the term of council priorities to be considered and ideally made. The one would be with regard to what Raymond just spoke about, the need to more quickly transition away from using fossil fuels within the city's fleet. We know that the buses that OC Transpo drives burn diesel, and while the $6 million electric bus pilot project is a good first step, we'd like to see a term of council priority specifically related to more quickly transitioning away from the use of fossil fuels within the city's fleet. So that would be the one request. And I just want to see if these slides are going to work to show you that cities around the world are doing a wonderful job at bringing in bus lanes on existing roads. So this is from Boston, where they've used something as cheap as a pylon to designate an existing road to be a bus priority road. So the city has the ability to dramatically, change and improve what occurs within the right-of-way. And it probably is the greatest single thing that the city could do to reduce transportation emissions would be to put in some pop-up bus lanes. Now, I know LRT was great at reducing emissions, but there's still a ton of emissions, multiple hundreds of tons of emission being spewed into the atmosphere every year. And so these low-cost tactical urbanism strategies to reallocate road space to pedestrians and cyclists and public transit vehicles can dramatically increase the speed that buses can travel through our city. So they would increase the frequency, they would increase the reliability. And so committing to this idea within the term of council priorities, I think, is absolutely necessary and justified. I'll just show you that there was a review of tactical urbanism that was done. There have been many examples across North America of these pop-up bus-only lanes. What they found in this review of these projects was that they sped up the journey for people riding on the bus, they improved safety, they increased ridership to a surprising degree. And in fact, that temporary bus lanes and other pilots aimed at speeding bus and streetcar trips reduce the time of those trips from 20 to 50%. So this is exactly the type of solution that we need in Ottawa's public transit system. We know LRT is good when it's working, but the system very much still relies on buses, and we need to ensure that those buses are more quickly able to bring people to their destinations. In Toronto, with their King Street pilot project, they saw an increase, which is also positive, of 400% in terms of the number of people biking along that stretch of King Street in Toronto. So these are the types of things we need to see here in Ottawa. So yeah, I'd love it if the good people of the Transit Commission would please endorse the recommendations. I'm trying to advance to the next slide, but certainly we're seeing that cities are doing this. We know that Ottawa has a lot of great plans to increase bus rapid transit lines across Ottawa. We're urging you to quickly implement those. Don't wait for the multiple tens of millions of dollars to do it permanently and to necessarily upgrade everything. You can do things for as little as the cost of a pylon. And other cities have shown that this can be done, it should be done. And so I would just urge you to do that. And then certainly with regard to reducing the emissions from the tailpipes of OC Transpo buses.
Mr. Hache?
This is a major health issue. We know that the fine particulate matter that is spewed out of OC Transpo's buses damages human health, and it contributes to greenhouse gas pollution. So more needs to be done. It'd be great to see these ideas, these two ideas, included in the term of council priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hache. Commissioner Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hache, do you know, I don't want to steal the chair's thunder, of course, but do you know how much the LRT has reduced the CO2 emissions by OC Transpo?
I think, the mayor and other people working for the city, getting paid good money, can provide you with that information. I'm interested in going the next step, which is the bus rapid transit improvements and reducing the emissions from the tailpipes from the bus. So it's great to keep bringing up things that have already been committed to. I'm asking the city to go further because we know that the climate crisis demands we go further, and it would actually help save us a bunch of money. It would improve people's commutes to go further, and it would make the public transit system more reliable and efficient.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your presentation. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you, Commissioner Olson. Questions of staff? Councillor Brockington?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to staff, my issue is regarding that there's only one priority for this commission. There are other transit or public transit-related items listed under other committees, particularly FEDCO. When I read the report and look at some of the other, what I call minor priorities listed for other areas, and then I look at transit, which is such a significant component of a vibrant city to move people, why we are not listing other issues such as the online booking system, or we are talking about now that LRT's opened, the quarterly reports, the metrics that we were collecting, and yes, there may be some on the website, but these are important, and we need, I'm definitely getting assurances that the online booking system will be rolled out, and we will do that, but making it a priority sends the right message. It confirms to the public that this will be a priority for us this term of council. It's not going to add new work, because the city manager is concerned that if we add priorities that are new, we'll just be adding more and more work on to the senior staff. So I think there's some merit and value in focusing on the Transit Commission's main objectives over the next 4 years. And even if it's something we know we're going to be doing, to make it a priority, to enshrine it in this document, and to send the message to the system and the public that this is what we're going to be focused on. So, Mr. Chair, I just raise that. I don't have anything that I have prepared today to amend, but I will want to reach out to transit staff between now and when this matter comes to council in mid-December, because I do believe there's some value in maybe 2 additions, particularly one about paratranspo and one about the metric collection and reporting that we used to do but stopped about 3 or 4 years ago. I believe this was before I was on council, but I don't know if staff have anything else to add other than this is something that I would like to pursue further, and we'll be reaching out to transit staff in the next week or so.
Chair, the councillor brings up a very good point, and I know the city manager and I were talking about this, and you're quite right in that it looks, on the surface, it looks like we just have one. It's a big priority.
Sure.
What I believe is lacking, and I'd be happy to work with you to give direction or however way you want to do it. What I believe we should bring forward is what we used to do before we turned it all off because of the LRT and the disruption nature of it is we used to bring an annual business plan to the Transit Commission to say, here's what we're working on, and they all feed up into the corporate priority plan. And what I'm hearing over and over again is, I think we owe you a report where we come back and say, you don't need to move anything into the corporate priority plan, but let me tell you what we are working on for this term of council in this mandate in this room. Things like the performance management system, which, as one of the speakers talked about, how do we bring you a database and informative metrics so you can make policy decisions? The annual survey that we used to do, we turn that off, we reinstate that back. The marketing plan, how do we build ridership, the annual business plan, both here's what we're doing and the annual reporting that we want to do. If you're good with that, Chair and members of the Commission, what I'll commit to is in Q1, we'll bring back that report because we're doing all those things, and I think it's getting lost in the discussion of all these things, including, part of that business plan is the para online booking and so forth. So I'm where the city manager is. I don't think you need to add more priorities because it may just cloud the thing. I owe you a list that says, here's everything that we're doing, and does that fit in with the vision of the Transit Commission for your term? And I'm happy to commit to that, to bring that in Q1. It'll be a crisp report that lists those initiatives because we have strategically brought all the reports forward in the past that said we weren't going to do performance measurement, we weren't going to do and so forth. So we owe you all that. And of course, with the delay of the train and so forth, we've kind of lost some of those things in terms of where they fit. So if that works, that's a commitment I can certainly do to work with yourself and the chair in terms of bringing that back in Q1.
Yeah, I'd like to meet with you over the next week if possible, just to talk about that a little further, but we shouldn't govern this commission, Mr. Chair, as you know, through Twitter. We all have, I think, strong, passionate reasons why we serve on this commission, and there are a lot of things that I don't see as monthly updates that I'm interested in. And if I knew that Mr. Manconi had an annual work plan per se, and he shared that with this commission once a year and says, here are the key objectives that the commission is going to be working on this year, we're going to be really focusing on, you know, these top 5, that's really good because it gives us that information and those updates. So I don't really care whether it's a priority or not. I think there's some benefit in identifying priorities in this document. But if there's another way to do it and Mr. Manconi agrees to meet with me in the next week just so I can have a better understanding, I'm okay with that.
That's good to hear. Okay, so then the recommendation is that the Transit Commission consider the actions under its mandate as outlined in Document 1 and forward its recommendations to council for consideration at the meeting to be held on December 11th, 2019. These recommendations will proceed to council in a report from the Finance and Economic Development Committee. Is that item carried here at the commission? Carried? Thank you. All right. Next, we have the delegation of authority contracts awarded for the period of January 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. And I believe we have one delegation to that, and it's Miranda Gray. Oh, sorry, Councilor, you wanted it held. We'll do the delegation first, or? No, she said no. She said no? Okay, thanks. Okay, then right to Councilor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for holding this. I had a question about one of the items. It's actually item 41, the supply and deliver 82 40-foot transit buses for transit operations. So I'm just curious as to when those buses were delivered, are to be delivered, how that approval came to be. I'm just not sure what those buses are.
Mr. Chair, so the city participates in a cooperative purchasing program with Metrolinx where we have the option to purchase buses. In 2018, we entered into a contract with Nova to make an original order. This was an extension to that. Mr. Manconi had made reference to some replacement buses, the delivery of which has been advanced. It's these buses that we're referring to.
But this is 82 buses. I'm not a math major, but I just don't. I don't understand where the 40, does this include the 40 that we just put on or are just coming onto the road to replace R1? Like is this the 40 from January, the 20 for R1? Like what are these? I just don't know what the 82 buses are.
It's normal replacement, so I'll use round numbers. We used to have 1,000 buses of different types. There is a 15-year life cycle of those buses, and they get ordered in different periods. As they go through 2 stages. Midlife, we rehabilitate them. Year 15, they have to be disposed of. We order them in year 13 and a half, so that they come in for year 15. So there's a constant flow. Right now, what you're starting to see is a big replacement on major acquisitions. There was a big purge or a big purchasing that went on about 10 years ago and so forth. So this is major purchases coming forward on buses, and it continues. We're into heavy replacements and some growth like the 19. So it's just replacing existing buses in the fleet.
Thank you. So just one other question then, because you know, at Transit Commission a few months ago, we agreed to a pilot on electric buses, and I just worry that we continue to purchase diesel buses when I know we haven't done the pilot, but we know that the technology exists. We know it's getting better, and I just, you know, I'm looking for some assurance that staff are starting to turn their attention to electric buses or alternative buses, and not just continuing along the same path that we have.
Councillor, you're right. These were already purchased. The detour buses, we needed to purchase those. If you recall what I said at the time, and we're staying on that mission, is we're going to do the pilot electric bus. I want to get those in service this summer. The money's been secured. We know how to go for the RFP that you've requested. And then we owe you a report to come back, because we've got major purchases coming, and the Transportation Master Plan also speaks to alternative fuels. It's not just electric. It's, do you want to look at hydrogen? Do you want to look at CNG? All sorts of things out there. So what I committed to is, and this speaks back to Councillor Brockington's comment about, what's on your work plan? Well, on the work plan is do the pilot and bring back a report saying, here's your next 10-year outlook. Are you making a commitment to shift to alternate fuels? And here's the cost implications. I know everybody's running around saying you're going to save millions of dollars and so forth. We will bring you all that business case, and you will have a very complex decision to make about whether or not you're committing yourself to an alternate fuel, or you want to stay the course and do alternate things. But that's what we're going to be bringing forward to you.
And will that, are you at all involved in the upcoming climate master plan that is coming back to Environment Committee? Because,
Councillor, is that related to the delegation of authority piece, or better in the budget?
Well, no, it's not. I guess it isn't. I can ask you that offline.
I think you're really stretching.
Good catch. Good catch.
Thank you. I keep a close eye on her, Mr. Manconi. Okay, so if we're done with that item, is that carried, everybody? Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor McKinney. So now, let's move on here. So next we'll receive a presentation on the 2020 draft operating budget for the Transit Commission, followed by public delegations. The Vice Chair will read the budget roadmap motion for the Transit Commission right now, and we may have a number of amending motions to consider. I would remind members that if they propose to introduce any motions that contain financial implications, we would do well to ask for a comment from the service staff on the financial implications and implementability of such a motion. Members have also been advised that if they are asking for anything with an associated cost, they are to find the offsetting revenues. Okay. Did you want to read the motion? Sure.
So that at the end of the presentation and the delegations, the motion that commissioners will be asked to consider is that the Transit Commission recommend that Council, sitting as Committee of the Whole, approve the Transit Commission 2020 draft operating and capital budget as follows. Transit services as follows. User fees on pages 4 to 6. Operating resource requirements on page 3. And number 2, Transit Commission capital budget, pages 7 and 8. Individual projects listed on pages 16 to 37.
Sorry, okay, sorry. Is there any amending motions introduced? Yours? Do you want to do it now? Sure.
Just to get it on the record now before we receive delegations, Mr. Chair, one motion that I have, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's to introduce a family day pass, something that has been requested for a number of years now. I'll just read the therefore clauses. Therefore, be it resolved that OC Transpo implement the family day pass during the March break as scheduled in 2020 by the 4 school boards in Ottawa, beginning on the Saturday through to and including the following Sunday. Therefore, be it further resolved that OC Transpo implement the family day pass from July 1st to December 7th, 2020. Be it further resolved that OC Transpo implement the family day pass from the first Saturday of the primary and secondary school Christmas week through the period ending on the Sunday before school classes begin as scheduled in 2020-2021 by the 4 school boards in Ottawa. And therefore, be it further resolved that staff report back in the proposed 2021 budget with any estimated changes to ridership and fare revenue that were recorded in 2020 so that Council can make a decision on whether to make this a regular change to the OC Transpo fare table. So I'm just introducing that at this time.
Thank you. Service staff have agreed to undertake this. You've consulted with them?
The note I received back from staff is that Mr. Scrimger had seen this and is supportive of the wording. If they have additional comments, we can invite them to speak.
Okay, because you're mentioning funding this out of transit reserves instead of having an offset, so we have an agreement somewhere with this? Is that right?
Sorry, are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you, is there a funding offset to this, or you're waiting and going to look at?
I don't believe this is going to be a cost, and that's why there's not an offset produced.
Okay, okay, we'll deal with then, staff will come back to it after delegations. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Any other motions? Councillor Kavanaugh? Yeah, do yours.
Thank you. This is a directive to staff. Is this an appropriate time then? Okay. That staff review the Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee proposal to Transit Commission entitled Senior Pick Your Ride Free Day, and report back to the Transit Commission with information on the feasibility of implementing this proposal now or in the future. This is about the possibility of changing what is now Wednesday to another weekday, so that seniors can make appointments on other days other than that day that has been pre-picked.
Thank you, and Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas Council has adopted a transit long-range financial plan which predicted annual increases to the transit fare to keep pace with the transit cost of inflation and maintain the appropriate balance between funding of transit from taxes and fares, and whereas on June 15th, 2016, approved the annual fare increase should be made January 1st each year to be consistent with the city's budget year, subject to the annual budget approval, whereas by decision of Council, the 2019 fare increase was frozen until October 1st, 2019, in recognition of the delay of the opening of O-Train Line 1, whereas the 2020 draft budget recommends an overall 2.5% base increase of OC Transpo fares to take effect on January 1st, 2020, whereas the Transit Commission is of the opinion that the current service being provided by the O-Train Line 1 is not yet satisfactory, and that transit users have been experiencing challenging and uncertain commutes as a result of the ongoing issues of service interruptions on LRT, whereas maintaining the current fares would recognize the challenges experienced by OC Transpo customers since the launch of LRT, and whereas freezing the fares at 2019 levels from January to March 2020 would result in the approximate reduction of fare values of $980,000, and the City Treasurer has advised that this is reasonable to expect that this reduction over a short term can be funded through the financial performance provisions of the project agreement and with the Rideau Transit Group. Therefore, be it resolved that effective date for the recommended 2020 fare increase be amended from January 1st to April 1st, 2020, with the anticipated revenue reduction of $980,000 to be funded from the anticipated funds from the financial and performance provisions and the project agreement with the Rideau Transit Group, and be it further resolved that the Transit Commission recommend the Council direct the General Manager of Transportation Services to bring forward recommendations to Transit Commission and Council no later than February 2020 on how a freeze beyond March 2020 could be funded in the event LRT services and transit passengers has not improved to the city's satisfaction.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tierney. So, Councillor Manconi, if you're ready, then we'll now go to the... Councillor, sorry, I'm jumping ahead to the next term.
Okay.
Sorry.
I will not comment
Mr.
on that.
Manconi, please, if you're okay. I'm sorry, maybe I need a break. Thank you. If you want to start your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, members of committee, this is your first year of a multimodal service, as we've said over and over again. The draft operating budget reflects the investments to bus service that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And that, as we've said throughout the morning and this afternoon, is based on the feedback we've heard. Stage 2 construction has begun, and we're back in the detour business, not to any scope and scale of stage 1, but I can tell you that we have to be very sensitive to it. There's a lot of people that will be impacted on the Trillium line. students and so forth that will need good, robust bus service there. So we're working very diligently with our stakeholders to make sure that they're informed. There'll be lots of communication coming out to ward councillors, to the commission, and to the stakeholders along the line. The mitigation measures that I mentioned in my earlier presentation come from non-payment of the monthly RTM fees and contractual clauses, as I've said throughout the day, so I won't dwell on that. In terms of the key highlights, there's a $7.5 million investment for bus service with the additional 19 buses. You are increasing your bus fleet by 40. That's a base adjustment. That doesn't disappear. And we'll figure out all of the capital replacement plans accordingly with those 40 buses and so forth down the road. $2 million for increased para-transpo service. The freeze to Equipass, Community Pass, and Access Pass is also included in there. There's the $15 million capital funding, which funds the closure of the Trillium line and provides the bus detours, and continued capital investment across all aspects of the service. Fare increase was originally planned January 1, 2020. That's subject to the motion, or draft motion, that you're going to be debating. In terms of ridership, we're basing the budget on about 99.4 million customer trips. That's about 2.6% higher than the ridership over the last 12 months. We are expecting it to grow. You've seen the estimates this morning. I won't repeat those, but September looks like it was up. October and year-to-date is trending upwards, which is very positive. In terms of fare revenue, you're generating about $203 million in fare. It incorporates the fare increase and the offset if you approve the motion. In terms of para-transpo, I know there's been lots of questions. What do we get for that investment? That's about another 55 to 70,000 more trips to accommodate the increased ridership. So that does a bunch of things. We don't overspend the account, and we also can accommodate more rides, and a fare revenue of about $2.1 million for para. Service expansion, it's for service reliability, increased capacity, reducing waiting times, and also to provide connections. And it's not just about the existing ridership, it's also the new growth areas across the city. Many of you have spoken about this to us, and again, we'll reiterate, we're happy to work with councillors to drill into the details on reliability and capacity. And just to make sure there's no confusion, the instructions to Pat and his team is when he is meeting with you, if you want to have the trade-off discussion, please have it very succinctly with us. So if we're proposing something to you and you say, I'd rather do something else to increase reliability rather than expand service, we're wide open to that. I'm just being as candid as I can so that we understand how critical this bus service is to our customers and to yourselves, and we're open to those trade-off discussions, and we have flexibility in our policies to do that. So in terms of a roll-up, our target was $22.8 million. Again, what I said this morning, this is not contingent on going to other departments and so forth, so it's a balanced operating budget based on what's before you and in the details that's in the books. In terms of capital highlight, bus life cycle, that is a very wise investment. It keeps your fleet current. You have one of the best fleets out there in North America in terms of age, maintenance, and our staff do a great job of life cycling them. The detours, and also the critical little things. I've heard suggestions that we're forgetting about some of those things. We're not. They may not get the profile that's needed, but a bus stop is important, a shelter and so forth. So you have funding in there for the fundamentals, which are important for our customers. Now I'm going to turn it over to the treasurer, who wanted to speak to the reserve balances. I know there's some questions on that.
Thank you, John. First off, I want to actually apologize to the citizen commissioners because this information on reserve balances is not in your transit budget book. It actually is only in the transmittal report, which I don't think you received. I've spoken to the new treasurer, and she assures me that in future budget books, you will get the reserve balances. You'll get a continuity table included. So you have basically 5 sources of funding for both your capital and your operating. You have a transit operating reserve, which we established a couple of years ago, and there's $1.5 million in it, and right now we are projecting no change in that. But I will tell you right now that the 2019 number, the year-end, the opening balance may in fact change. We were not forecasting a surplus in transit, but we may have a surplus at the end of the year. If there is a surplus, it goes into this account. Your transit capital, as you can see, you have about $17 million in there. We contribute $85 million a year. Included in that is the $9.8 million increase in 2020. And this year, we are using 3.5 of that. Although it's supposed to be used for capital, we are contributing 3.5 of it to operating in order to deal with the additional buses that you need for the reliability issues in 2020. That will have to be fixed in the 2021 budget because you cannot sustain that over time, that ongoing contribution from your transit capital reserve. And then you will see that we are contributing $90 million to your capital programs in 2020, leaving you with a small balance of 8.9. I will tell you this right now, though, that that does not include other commitments that you have made in previous years which go over time. An example of that is on the bottom you can see there's $117 million from the Transit Capital Reserve. That's for stage one. You'll be paying that over the next 30 years. We haven't taken that out of the reserve, but we have that built into our plan. So we know how much you need every year, how much you have available. But there is money that needs to be taken out of that account every year for the debt servicing. Same with the development charges. Provincial gas tax. Provincial gas tax is roughly $36 million a year. You have $11 million that was not committed or spent from previous years. You can use provincial gas tax. It only can be used for transit. It can be used in operating, and it can be used in capital. Right now, we are transferring $19 million to operating for for operational services. There's another $18 million that's for debt servicing, where you've approved capital works that are to be funded from gas tax, service debt. That goes in every year. And then we've got $2 million going to a capital project in 2020. So that leaves you with a balance of about $8 million left in your gas tax reserve. Your federal gas tax, the much larger portion of the gas tax, $56 million you get a year, that can be used for a variety of things, but it can only be used for capital. It cannot be used for operating. So prior councils had committed that that federal gas tax was to go to transit. This year, as a result of the one-time payment we got on the federal gas tax, roughly $58 million additional dollars, council decided that they would, in fact, use that money to bridge the gap that we've got in our infrastructure funding for basically roads, bridges, and active transportation. And we would in turn, because the provincial gas tax doubling didn't happen, use what we were going to use on the tax side for that gap. We would use that and contribute that to the transit capital reserve. But the balance there is fairly large, $59 million. But a large part of that is committed to that plan to basically replace the provincial gas tax with tax dollars over roughly a 7-year period. So roughly $40 million of that would be committed to that plan over the next 3 years. And then finally, you have your development charges. You collect development charges for growth-related projects that are transit. We have increased that charge consistently over the years, recognizing that transit was the #1 priority in terms of growth. You are receiving, we forecast that you're going to have contributions of $62 million from development charges for transit. And right now, you can see the capital contribution is only $9 million. You have $23 million that is going for debt servicing, leaving you with 118. But if you look on the bottom, it says you actually have a commitment right now of $229 million in development charges that we will pay over the next 30 years, which is part of what we're paying for the debt servicing. So we haven't taken it out because otherwise it would put it in a big negative. But again, that's built into our plan. We have basically a plan that goes to 2042, takes into account all of these reserves, takes into account all the contributions, all the increases to the contributions, and provides you with an idea as to what you can spend over the next 30 years on transit capital and also to maintain your operating.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the presentation. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Merci. First, can we, Melinda or someone else, can we make sure that the citizen commissioners have perhaps a copy of the slide with respect for Commissioner Wright, Gilbert, Caracato, and Olson, copy of the reserve slide, as that might just to guide them in their questions. We have, we'll go to delegations first. Mr. Murray Gallant from the Accessibility Advisory Committee was to present. Deputy Mayor Lulaf was to, in his absence, was to provide his comments, but he's not available. But his documentation is on file for the commissioners. And so I would ask our first delegation, Dominic D'Angelo, to provide comments.
Can I go? Thank you, Chair Hubley, City Councilors, and Transit Commissioners. My name is Dominique. I'm a member of the Healthy Transportation Coalition, and I'm here to share my experience as a transit user living on a low income. I was drawn to the Healthy Transportation Coalition because it fights for improvements to issues that I was directly affected by when I lived in low-income housing. Ottawa's public transit fails people like me who have no other transportation option. I'm not what you would call a functioning member of society yet, but if you want more of us to transition to being active participants, public transit needs to be closer, more accessible, more reliable, and more affordable. As someone living on ODSP, I relied on public transit to go to medical appointments and therapies, free leadership trainings, wellness workshops, exercise, occasional social opportunities, and school. These resources located across the city allowed me to survive dark times, and having access to them was crucial in my recovery from major depression. They increased my well-being and helped me build the skills and confidence I feel I need to be ready for a normal life. I wish I could say that the transit flowed smoothly and made it easier to commit to my schedule, but that's far from the truth. With the recent LRT and service changes, more people have expressed their discontent about Ottawa's transit system, but in my experience, it was always terrible and not worthy of a major city, let alone the nation's capital. Public transit hindered my progress. Knowing how critical attending my commitments was to my recovery, I really tried to push myself, but the commute problems were so frequent that just the thought of it triggered anxiety and dread. With all the other challenges that I faced, taking OC Transpo meant that I'd end up physically and emotionally exhausted at the end of the day. As a result, I often bailed out and chose to avoid life. I had 99 problems, and transit was certainly one of them. My regular bus routes were predictably unreliable, with lateness, no-shows that occurred almost on a daily basis. When I couldn't afford to be late, I'd sometimes rush up the hill to catch another bus that would take me to Lincoln Field Station. But with unsynchronized apps and GPS, what is called tracking reliability, I believe, I never knew if I risked seeing the bus go past after I had just left my initial stop. When this happened, the frustration often caused me to walk back home only to sleep all day. I could go on about the times that transit failed me, like the time that I was 3 hours late for supper on New Year's Eve after waiting in the freezing cold for 3 buses that never came, or walking up the hill to avoid being late with snow up to my hips, leaving me with wet boots and feet all day. Or being late for a university exam or medical appointment, paying late cancellation fees to appointments, paying twice for a one-way trip across the city due to unreliable services and expired transfers, and the list goes on. The financial, physical, and emotional burden of taking public transit has been detrimental to my mental health. I've used food banks more times than I want to admit, and I can't remember the last time that I made a payment on my student loan. Having an anxiety disorder and struggling with depression can leave you with very little energy and willpower. And while I like to think that I'm resilient, the added frustration that I've come to expect from OC Transpo increased the burden and risk of deep isolation. Public transit in Ottawa is more than just inconvenient, and anyone with a better option would be foolish to waste their time on it. The lack of a better transit system affects everybody, but if you're in my situation, it can make or break you. I'm not saying this to have your pity, but it's the reality of many people living on a low income. Many tenants in low-income housing suffer from health issues, whether mental or physical disabilities, and life is difficult enough as it is. Poor transit in our areas hinder our progress. Improving housing and transit for people like me will support more of us to transition back into society. I've provided you with a list of points from campaigns of the Healthy Transportation Coalition that I feel could maybe help solve some of the problems that I mentioned in my story. Mr. Chair and Councillors, I look forward to seeing some productive action that you will take. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we have, sorry, Councillor Kavanaugh has a question for you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that this must have been difficult for you to come here and speak out, given your story, so I thank you very much. One of the things that we did do was keep a freeze on the low-income passes to help out, but yeah, I think you're quite right that we have to do better for service and make it more reliable for you, because clearly that's a problem, as well as the clearing paths, and those are things that we're going to be working on. So I just wanted to ask you about your top concern about the reliability. Has it been since the implementation of the new system? Has that been more problematic for you?
I actually moved out of that area this summer, so I'm no longer in the area that I was, but I know that it was a problem, and for 6 years that I lived in low-income housing, it has been. And there's a lot of people with mobility issues and mobility devices, and, you know, having to stay in all winter because it's hard to get to the bus stop, I think was one of the problems, but I don't live there anymore, so I don't know.
Thank you. Can I just ask staff, do we have any kind of advisory for the low-income groups, those that are on the Equipass and low-income passes? Do we have any group that we talk to in terms of recommendations on routes or on process in general?
So, Mr. Chair, one of the things that we have done is we've engaged with, I think it's about 75 different organizations across the city who support people in low income in various ways to give them information on how they can provide support or advice for the people they're assisting on how to get access to the Equipass, both for the monthly passes and for the single ride passes. When it comes to planning transit services, we're guided by the equity and inclusion lens that City Council has adopted, and the Transit Commission has adopted some policies of how to apply that as we consider changes in areas which are have above average representation of people in low incomes.
Thank you. Perhaps we need to look at that a little stronger in terms of low-income people, because they tend to be voiceless for the most part, and we have to find a way of getting it more formal that we look at these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next presentation is going to be John Reddens, followed by Christine Santel.
Fare parity on fares is failing on people depending on what area you're living in. It's not fair if you're living in South Ottawa. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example, but it's a bad example, but this gives you an idea. if you want to go to the Gatineau Casino, you're paying a regular fare. But if I live in Huron Gate, I'm paying $8.50. How does that make sense? Our city's getting larger for fares for paratransport customers, but we're failing them. I see it, paratransport customers are paying the price once again for the shortfalls. I'm looking at the investment that you're putting in for taxis. Is the money there to train the taxi drivers how to approach customers? That is lacking in this city. Are the customers aware that if they feel that a contractor is treating them badly, they know the policy that they can report them? I don't think they do. And that's one of the things I could see is lacking. But the one thing is the fare is not a fair. Fair is not fair. That's what I'm going to say. And also on the paratransport buses. Why do we have to, some days the buses are idling and they're raising the buses. The customers have to shake the bus to put the buses in gear. Why do we have to sit in soaked seats for the roofs leaking? Why do we have to, for people that are sitting in the seats, have to worry about their windows popping open when they're going over bumps? These are safety issues. We have to address that. I see no money for new buses. Some of the transmissions are going on those buses. Those are major dollars, ladies and gentlemen. I used to be an automotive parts manager. I know for Chevrolet dealer, and they're quite expensive, especially for the diesels. I don't know, it's becoming again that we are avoiding us, and it's time to step up. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for coming, and if I can, you talked about shaking the bus to get them in gear. That's a maintenance issue. Is that what I understand? That
It's been doing that, sir, since it was new.
Okay. Can anyone from OC Transport, Paratransport comment on how the I think they're 2 years old?
No, they're much older than that. I'll start with the back end. We do have in the capital life cycle to replace them. I believe they're on a 7-year life cycle. What I will commit to, Mr. Chair, because I have seen Mr. Redden's issues, and the minute I get them, they go immediately to Mr. Greer, and he addresses them. But what I will commit is that we will meet with Mr. Redden's one more time and get through his entire list. I've heard about the windows, I've heard about the shaking, I've heard about all those things, and I know they've all been actioned, but if they're still outstanding, you have my commitment. Mr. Redden's, you and I have met numerous occasions. We'll meet again with Mr. Greer, who's here, and we'll personally inspect any vehicle that also I encourage him when he sends us the email, give me the bus number and we'll track it down.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. And I think the only, if I can, just for inquiry, ensuring that our customers are aware of the procedure if they have a concern about a contractor or any supplier that is picking up, any driver that is picking up.
And also for investment into training the contractor. We train our drivers, train the in-house drivers. We have to start training the outhouse, the contractor drivers on how, especially with Ontario AODA, but now with OC Transport, we're on federal guidelines. Now they have a disability legislation federally that we have to address.
Thank you. Any question from commissioners to the delegation? Commissioner Caricato, please.
Just want to give you an opportunity to explain some of the shortcomings of the taxi contracted rides versus a regular parabus coming to pick you up.
the problem is how do you get contact with them if you're within the half-hour jurisdiction of, say, for example, you have the half-hour deadline to pick up. When I started taking paratransport, I was in the taxi, but the unfortunate thing is my legs are so long I couldn't fit in the cars, so that I've had permanently gone into the van. But with the half hour, you phone in and say, where's my bus? I mean, where's my ride? And there's a delay there because there is you have to go through the taxi company to find out where it is. But I just thought of something else too. With now in a separate building, you're phoning the operator, and then it gets relayed by computer. You're also tying up the phone lines an extra 5 to 10 minutes when the dispatcher keys back on the computer to tell them where they are. That's another issue of tying up the telephone lines that has to be addressed as well.
Just to follow up, is that part of the online booking system? Will that be?
Commissioner and delegation, if we could relate this to budget resources for paratransport, that would be.
Okay, are there
Given
any
that
other
that's-
issues then with the taxi supplement?
Not
related to budget.
I haven't been on the taxi for a while, so that's why but I'm pretty weak on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other commissioners for Mr. Reddens? Thank you, John. It was nice to see you last night. Thank you for your continued commitment to the community. John was recently elected as part of the Alta Vista Community Association Board of Directors. It's always good to see you. The next delegation, Madame Christine Santelé, s'il vous plaît.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair Oublé and all the Transit Commissioner. My name is Christine Santelé. I'm a resident of Vanier and a member and a volunteer with Kawi City for All Women Initiative and the LT Transportation Coalition. I'm here today to talk to my experience with OC Transpo and advocate to transit equity in Ottawa. As a woman and a low-income person, experience disability, who rely heavily on transit for any mobility across the city, I'm deeply impacted by the disruption and the change in transit service across Ottawa. And I'm here to speak on behalf of my community that has echoed similar challenge with the transit. Before I speak to my experience, I would like to thank the Council for the freeze in this year on the transit fare in the City of Ottawa Draft Budget 2020 for people who use Access Pass, Community Pass, and EquiPass. The freeze reflects the OC Transpo's commitment to apply the City of Ottawa Equity and Inclusion Lens to all its service to make sure that no one is excluded from such an important and basic services as public transit. The change and disruption in bus services and LRT have created many hurdles for me and many members of my community, particularly low-income women who rely on transit as their only means of transportation. Research conducted by Kawi and LT Transportation Coalition consistently shows that gender difference in the use of public transit, whereas men tend to take transit to get from point A to point B and back, women tend to make multiple stops as they use public transit to perform multiple daily tasks as primary caregiver in their families, such as getting to and from work, volunteering, going to grocery store, or getting to social services. Women are also more likely than men to accompanying someone while using transit system, whether to be traveling with children to child care and recreation centers, or to accompanying family members to medical appointments and services. Since the change of the bus routes in October 6, 2019, my waiting time for buses have increased significantly. I had to wait 45 minutes for bus 11 that is scheduled to come every 15 minutes on weekday. On November 12, I had to wait an hour from 4 p.m. until 5 p.m. for the number 19 at the University of Ottawa. It was very cold and windy that day. And while I was fortunate that I had a bus shelter to protect me from the wind, many bus stops do not have bus shelter, forcing residents to wait in extreme temperature to access public transit. The delays in bus routes and the need to make multiple stops is particularly stressful for transit users like myself.
1 minute left, please.
Since the Equifair transit time only lasts an hour and a half, I asked Transit Commissioner to increase the standard transfer time by an hour from 1 hour and a half to 2 hours and a half for people who use Equifair, like me, because they cannot afford Equipass, and also for people who use the single ride voucher. So I will conclude like that. The increase in standard transfer time and in implementing a sliding scale for Equipass would facilitate greater social and economic participation in low-income individuals, particularly for women and families in our city. Thank you for listening, and I'm waiting for your decision in response to my concern.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kavanaugh, you have a question for the delegation?
Thank you very much, and thank you for representing Cowie, a City for All Women initiative. I think it's very important to hear your voice here at the table when we're discussing issues regarding transit and what we do in the future. My question is actually for staff. Are we consulting with Cowie on issues such as low-income women and their particular concerns?
Councillor, this is questions for delegation. We can do staff after if you wish.
Do you know, I'm sorry, your name, Ms. Santale, are you aware if Cowie has been consulted on, by transit on their concerns?
That's something I must ask back the question for Cowie to answer you correctly on that issue.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure that I
Okay.
cannot answer for them.
Okay.
So I need to get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
So next up is Mr. Cullen, Alex Cullen, followed by Sally Thomas. And Mr. Cullen, I see you've got on the list here under 2 different organizations. As you know, the rule is each speaker gets 5 minutes, so you need to either combine your 2 presentations or choose between them, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm accompanied by Asaf Mita. We are members of the Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee. That presentation will be brief. Following that, I will be representing the Federation of Citizens Association, and I'll be accompanied by Mr. Brian Ure, which has a very different presentation. These are 2 separate organizations. I happen to be their spokesperson, but I'm not double dipping, in other words, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cullen, the mayor's ruled on that very clearly. We're not going to debate it here. You're one speaker, you get 5 minutes. You choose how you want to use your 5 minutes,
So,
please.
Mr. Chairman, you wish me to shortchange the Council on Aging or shortchange the Federation of Citizens Associations?
Hopefully, one or the other has someone else to speak to them, because we need to follow some rules around here, and that's one the mayor himself has ruled on. So if you don't mind, it'd be greatly appreciated on
So, Mr. Chairman,
our behalf.
Mr. Asaf Mita will make our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
I'm appearing before you on behalf of the Ottawa Seniors Transportation Committee. The CAO is most appreciative of your leadership, policies and concerns shown for seniors transit. The Transportation Committee provides, our committee provides City of Ottawa seniors with information about public transit options as it relates to OC Transport's conventional and paratransport service, and identifies gaps that exist and pursues solutions for achieving their needs. Our committee thanks the city for maintaining the Ride Free Wednesday program and expanding the program to include Sundays. However, there are issues regarding the popularity of the Ride Free Wednesday program that need to be addressed. Unfortunately, it has led to overcrowding on the bus on Wednesdays, problems for seniors seeking seating on those busy days, and overcrowding in terms of seniors programming and appointments on that day. You will recall we came before you last year to ask for a more flexible approach regarding this program. We had proposed a seniors pick your free day, that is allowing seniors to choose one of the 5 days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, instead of being restricted to only the one Wednesday. We had canvassed seniors organizations and service providers and found widespread support for this proposal.
Sorry, right now we're dealing with the budget item. You're talking
Yes,
about
it is.
changing an existing program. I don't believe that we need to deal with this under the budget.
Mr. Chairman, you have your Councillor
How
Kavanaugh.
did you get a microphone,
tabled-
Mr. Cullen?
Mr.
How did
Chairman.
you get a microphone?
Sorry?
How did you get a microphone?
Mr. Chairman,
You're out of order.
You have a direction, budget direction in
No.
front of you, Mr. Chairman, and we have consulted with staff.
Mr. Cullen, you'll lose your 5 minutes following if you don't stop talking, okay? We have someone speaking here. I'm asking if it's related to the budget item. Is there a budget ask in here or something related to what we're trying to deal with, the item?
There is a
Because
budget
that's a
issue.
program that we can deal with. I know what you're recommending. We've heard it here before. We can get staff to take a look at that and see what can be done and make recommendations, but we don't need to change, as far as I know, we don't need to change the budget for that. I could be wrong, but I'll listen to you right now.
Okay, if we can finish this, it takes 30 seconds. We took the opportunity to meet with OC Transport staff recently to examine the problem, and I am pleased to able to tell you that OC Transport staff have indicated to us their willingness to work with us to resolve the overcrowding problem on Wednesdays. I've identified some possible solutions to explore. We are asking today that you direct staff to examine this issue and report back to you with possible strategies in order to help seniors travel safely in our bus system. In our view, this would help make Ottawa a leader as an age-friendly city for transportation. We thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the delegation? Okay, Commissioner Olson?
Thank you for this. And I think when this came up before, there was a question of whether or not it was technically feasible. And I think some people on council may be surprised to learn that certainly on this issue, at the very least, I'm very pro-choice. So if there are no technical concerns, I think we can address that. I don't know if you can answer that question or if that is in fact a question that OC Transpo can answer.
I have to refer it to Mr. Scrimgeour.
Mr. Chair, it is not technically possible in our current fare system. However, We met with this group recently. We understand the benefits that they see in their proposal, and we will review, if we're given the direction to do so, we'll review whether we can accommodate this technically in future updates to the fare system, and there are future updates coming.
Mr. Scrimger, is that going to include a change to the budget at this point in time? Because I'm trying to stay focused on the budget here. Or do you need more time and we can talk about this as part of the next year?
I can say, Mr. Chair, it would not require a change in funding. However, because the fare table is approved in the budget, there would, if we were to find it possible, we would need to change the words in the fare table. So it would not be a funding issue, but it would be a policy change which is embedded in the fare table. However, I will say I do not know how long it will take to get there, so it might not be in the current calendar year, or in the 2020 calendar year.
Thank you. That sounds very promising. Commissioner Olson, did you have other? You're good? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and good luck. That sounds very promising. Okay, Mr. Cullen, representing the Federation of Citizen Associations now, correct? Oh.
Microphone? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Federation of Citizens Associations is an umbrella group composed of 53 community associations across Ottawa. I'm joined by Brian Urey, who's a member of the FCA Transportation Committee. We meet monthly to discuss issues important to our members and have committees active on planning and zoning issues and on transportation issues. The crisis at OC Transpo and its LRT service is large, complex, and ongoing. Already, the Transit Commission Chair and the Mayor have announced a $7.5 million infusion into the LRT system, including adding 40 buses to the system to relieve the worst overcrowding and service issues, as well as postponing the proposed 2.5% fare increase from January to March 2020. However, many view this as inadequate to ensure service reliability and restore confidence and to resolve this crisis. Members of the Commission and City Councillors appear ready to add more buses and service on top of this and are searching for dollars to fund this, amounts unknown from sources unknown. In light of this difficult situation, the FCA proposes that the Transit Commission and City Council follow some principles in seeking funds to fix the LRT system. Number one, the LRT transit service is in crisis, and more funding should be applied to help to fix it. As the LRT transit service has replaced the transitway system, its efficient operation is crucial to the functioning of the city. Number two, the funding for these corrective services should not be taken from other city services, not from garbage pickup, not from public health, not from road repairs, and I can list other services. Transit, as you know, is funded through the Transit Property Tax Levy and transit fares. Given the effect of the LRT transit crisis on transit users, we do not support funding these corrective measures through raising fares. While supporting using additional taxes through the Transit Property Tax Levy to fund these corrective measures, we are not advocating a blank check, but a limited temporary transit property tax increase. We are aware that a 1% overall increase in the city's property taxes generates approximately $25 million at a cost of about $36 per average residential property, and recommend that the cost of corrective measures for LRT not exceed this, may even be less. What we're proposing here is a ceiling on funding these LRT fix. We're also recommending that following the successful implementation of these corrective measures, the LRT service should be reassessed to determine if this tax increase, if there is a tax increase, should remain in place or be scaled back in a subsequent budget. We believe that funding the fix to LRT is worth it, given the crucial role rapid transit plays in our city, but not at any cost. We hope that these principles will guide you in your recommendations to City Council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Just so I'm using headphones, but I want to make sure I'm clear. So you're proposing a 4% tax increase with the extra 1% going to transit and capped at that?
No, Mr. Chairman. The City Council will determine the tax levy for all the other services. We're here to talk about the amount of money that's needed to fix the LRT. We are proposing a ceiling on that. We recognize that it should come from some source. We believe it should come from taxes. We don't, we believe that at most, if the city needs to spend $25 million to fix LRT, it ought to. It may be less, but the whatever increase it is would be on top of whatever else the city council is approving. But the LRT fix, we believe, is necessary, and we're suggesting a ceiling and a means of funding that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cullen. Councillor Brockington.
Mr. Cullen, taxpayers pay $4 to $5 million a month to RTM to maintain the line, and that would include technical issues with the line. So we're already paying for that service. We heard today through a line of questioning, I think it was Councillor Fleury, when asked about Lisa McLeod's offer, money is not the solution to this problem. So what would additional money do to fix the mess? What is not being addressed now through proper funding that would be addressed with proper funding?
Yes. So we're not necessarily saying that spend $25 million. We're saying that if it is the opinion of this council that to make LRT work efficiently, it's going to cost more money, these are the principles you should follow. I recognize that there's monies being withheld from RTM and RTG, and some of those funds are going into some of the corrective measures. We've already had the mayor and the chair announced $7.5 extra million, plus the fare freeze. We believe that you may need to spend more to restore the confidence, provide the reliability of service that people expect. And if you are going to do that, these are the principles to follow. If it turns out at the end of the day you don't need it, that's great. But right now, I don't think you can convince the public that more ought not to be done than already done so far. I think the public is expecting that the system be fixed, the service be made reliable, and these are the principles to follow to make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Sally Thomas, followed by Trevor Hache. And maybe while we're changing over seats, if I could ask a question of the treasurer. Following that suggestion of a $25 million cap on additional transit funds from the transit levy, what would that do to the transit levy?
Is it on? That would be a significant increase to the transit levy, but I can tell you, if you raise $16 million across the city for all levies, and you wanted to raise an additional 25, that's 1.5% more. So your tax increase would be 4.5%.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Sally, whenever you're ready, thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. It's now evening. Been here all day. I have come to speak on the budget because I am a paratranspo user, at least part-time. I do use OC Transpo and the LRT. I'd like to congratulate you. The LRT is better than I was expecting, so I have to give you a mea culpa on that. I poo-pooed it initially, but it's not bad. My issue with the LRT is the connections, as everyone else's issue is. For people with disabilities, they have it arranged so that paratransport can drop them off at the LRT stations, but there aren't enough buses in paratransport to do anything, really, and $2 million doesn't even begin to cut it. Furthermore, putting the $2 million towards taxis, I think, is the wrong place to put it. The taxi drivers, as John and others have mentioned, are not very good. I volunteer at the hospital. They leave people behind quite regularly. They often don't speak English well or French, our two official languages, so they can't communicate with the passengers. Anyways, I think our $2 million would be better spent on hiring more bus drivers and or getting more buses. Yes, the taxis, it's a bus service and it's a public transit service, and frankly, I'm a little offended that you've augmented it with taxi drivers. If I wanted to take a taxi, I would pay for a taxi. It's a whole other experience that I don't wish to have. And that's basically all I have to say. Oh, sorry, I do have more to say. I would also like to ask why, if on OC Transpo there are 2 days for free days for seniors, are there not 2 days for seniors on Paratranspo? I know this because I was on the bus with a senior who told the driver, I'm a senior, she proved it to him with ID, and the driver called dispatch, and dispatch told him that no, it doesn't apply to Paratransfer users. That would solve some of the problem on OC Transfer, because the people that can use, the seniors that can use OC Transpo, use OC Transpo on those days because it's free. And I would too, like, it makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much, Sally. Perhaps, Mr. Manconi, if someone on your staff can answer that question about the Seniors' Day on Para for us, please.
Mr. Chair, the decision of council when free days were created, first on Wednesdays and later on Sundays, was that is for conventional service.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scrimger. Okay,
That
Sally?
doesn't answer my question. I'm asking why.
Yeah, well, as Mr. Scrimger just said, it was a decision of council, so what we've got to do is ask council to take a look at including para in there, what's the implications of that? And can it be done? Okay? It's a good question. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor McKenney's up, so maybe she can...
Sorry, no, it's just a comment that apparently nothing is free here. It's no cost, so just want to throw that out there.
Sally, can we undertake to try to get some more detail on that for you? Would that be okay?
Yes, that would be good, and then I could share it with others.
Absolutely. We'll publicize it when we can get some answers on that. Like, I'd like to get some background on how the decision was made not to add para into that, and then maybe we can share it, and is there a way to do it in the future? It may not be possible, so I got to get a little more info, okay? But I promise to make it public.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so next up is Trevor Hache, followed by Miranda Gray.
Thank you, Chair Hubley and members of the Transit Commission. I just have some concerns that are actually quite similar to Sally's concerns about the inequities in the fare structure. It's great that you're going to look into providing the rationale for excluding seniors who use Paratranspo in the no-charge transit service, but obviously it's a political decision. And I just want to address some of the other inequities in the system. And I'd like you to imagine for a moment your favorite rich senior citizen. Just close your eyes and picture your favorite wealthy senior citizen. Maybe they're a millionaire, like the gentleman on the screen. Or perhaps it's this gentleman. And people may know Terry Matthews, very wealthy senior citizen. Both him and the gentleman that was on the previous slide can ride on OC Transpo's public transit system for free, 2 days a week in Ottawa. And that's simply based on their age. I happen to know people who are choosing right now between whether to heat their house to the degree at which they'd feel comfortable in their home, or whether they're going to ride the bus because of these inequities that persist in the fare structure. So what I want to suggest to you is that while it's great and I appreciate the commitment to reviewing the inequity related to seniors who ride paratranspo, I would really love to encourage the city to review the entire fare structure for paratranspo to address all of the inequities, rather than take a piecemeal approach. So what our specific requests are to bring more equity to the fare structure, many of you would have received emails about. And certainly I want to thank the leadership of the mayor's office, because I believe he worked with staff to come forward with a draft budget that included a fare freeze for the Access Pass and the Community Pass and the Equipasses. That's good. But there are other things that need to be addressed. And so I would urge the city to rigorously apply its equity and inclusion lens to the fare structure. Right now, I think there are some areas in need of improvement. Specifically, if you work a minimum wage job, you are not allowed, basically your income means that you're not eligible for the Equipass. And that's not right. So in Toronto, the low-income cutoff line that they've used is 15% above what Ottawa's is using. So I'd urge the city to reconsider the cutoff line for Equipass eligibility and to consider increasing it by 15%. I would also urge the city to add a weekday of free transit for people living on low incomes. So we know that right now, there are 2 free days given to people simply based on their age. No income criteria is taken into consideration. It's simply based on their age. Earlier today, for the information of this committee, there was a report filed. It wasn't discussed, but it was talking about the rationale of the no charge transit that people in Ottawa are offered. And what was the rationale that was provided with regard to no charge transit for seniors? And I'm not suggesting that no charge transit for seniors should be discontinued, quite the contrary. But I just am reminding you that the rationale is that no charge service for seniors allows them the opportunity to travel to appointments, visit friends and family, and to be active without having to worry about paying a transit fare. So I would urge you to apply that same rationale to people living on low income. So right now, if you live on a low income, you don't get any free days of transit service. That needs to change, and I would urge that change to occur within this budget. I'd also urge the city to learn from the City of Calgary, which has implemented a sliding scale for transit fares, meaning if you make less than $12,000 a year in Calgary, you can get a monthly bus pass there for less than $6 a month. The more you earn in terms of your annual income, the more you pay. So what they have essentially is a progressive user fee for their public transit system, just like we have progressive taxation. So those are the improvements that I'm requesting, and I'd love to encourage political leadership to make these things a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hache. I just want to point one thing out about your presentation. In there, you included a picture of a private citizen and made a suggestion that they were riding transit for free. You used a picture of someone that I've known for 40 years. I believe Councillor Sudds has a long history with that person, and I've never known them to do something like that. So I don't know what you base that claim on. I'm sure there'll be...
All I was saying was that as a senior citizen in Ottawa, despite their significant income, they could theoretically ride transit for free if they wanted to, because the no-charge transit is provided to them based on their age.
So
that's all.
I think in future presentations, please...
I'd encourage you to read the article in the Ottawa Citizen that
Thank you very
picture
much
is
for your
related to.
presentation. Councillor Brockington, did you have a question, Mr. Hache?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hache, for your presentation. If I recall correctly, a year ago from your testimony, you said that the organizations you're involved with transit were not consulted on the addition of the Sunday free day. We had Wednesdays for seniors, and then the mayor made a campaign promise to add Sundays. And I just want to confirm that's the case, that you don't recall any consultation, whether it be from OC Transpo or the mayor, to add a second day. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. My understanding was a budget platform commitment that the mayor made. and on which he followed through on.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Miranda Gray, followed by Raymond Lowry, and then Catherine Gardner.
Hello, my concerns are mostly about items related to getting our service to stability. I love that you have funded extra buses and red vests until, well, maybe 3 months. But my personal feeling is we're going to be 6 months, maybe 9 months for that. And my concern is where we will find that money halfway through the year. So I would like to know what it costs to have the red vest program per week and to run those buses, those extra 40 buses per week.
Thank you. Continue with your presentation.
No, that is my presentation. That is my question, to be
Thank you.
honest.
Thank you
Because I
very
don't believe the money will be there when we're back here in April.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Thank you. The next person, Monsieur Lurie, Raymond Lurie.
Bonjour, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I'd actually like to start by thanking the chair and the mayor for the motion they passed last June to have OC Transpo run an electric bus pilot project. So $6 million was allocated to that, and we're looking forward to Councillor Brockington passed a motion at the meeting on the June 19th, I believe, to have an open tender process, and we're looking forward to seeing that happen. So the city and OC Transpo budgets are always under pressure. That's not going to change. What I'll be talking about today is doing something that will reduce costs. So earlier there was a question of whether, if people were proposing something, they wanted to get some savings somewhere to pay for it. In this case, we're talking about something that reduces costs. So, and that's adopting electric buses. So, if you recall from my presentation in June, there's really three, and I want to remind you, there's really three reasons why we would want the city to adopt electric buses. Three main reasons anyways. The first one is that we estimate that OC Transpo could save about $50,000 per year per bus on operational costs. That's a combination of savings of maintenance and mostly savings with fuel. So that's a significant amount of money that could be recouped if we assume 1,000 buses. Just to have a round number, that's $50 million per year that could be reinvested in things like paratranspo, better service, reducing fares, or a bunch of other things that would be great for the ridership. So the second reason is electric buses are cleaner and healthier. They're better for the operators because they don't spew out diesel fumes. And also, we're in a climate emergency, and OC Transpo actually produces 45% of the GHG emissions from the city's operation. So earlier had a question about other GHG emissions. If you want to ask that question again, I'll be happy to answer that later. So what we're saying is the city, if the city, the city has declared a climate emergency, so one of the things the city could do to essentially reduce, just by one decision, reduce the greenhouse gases that the city operations emit by 45%, that's going to electric buses, and that could be done within the next 12 to 15 years. And also, we are expecting that the federal government will announce that by 2023, they will no longer fund transit projects that are not zero emission. So that will become an issue very shortly in the future. Now, currently, e-buses are more expensive than diesel buses. That is projected to change over the next 5 to 10 years. That being said, the capital cost of buses is usually borne by other levels of government. And to give you some examples of things we've seen recently, so the city of Brampton started with a fund of about $5 million, and I'm not too sure where that came from, but I think it came from city money itself. And they got a commitment of $11.1 million from the federal government to add to that fund. Now, the motion that the chair and the mayor The motion that the chair and the mayor passed at full council instructed OC Transpo to look for money in other levels of government. We haven't seen evidence of that at this point, but we would encourage them to do that. If Brampton could get an extra $11 million on top of the $5 million they came up with, that means the City of Ottawa would be able to probably have $16 or more million to start the pilot project. That would make it a much more effective project. The City of Kingston, another example, I mentioned it briefly earlier.
1 minute left.
Thank you. So mentioned it briefly earlier, they're buying 2 long-range electric buses, and they are spending a total of $2.7 million for the project. They've got the numbers on the web if you're interested. Federal government is providing $1 million of that, and there's other funding from the Canadian Association of Municipalities, I believe, or something of the sort. So Kingston is putting only a small portion of the money in there. They will reap the benefits of the operational savings, which they will be able to reinvest. So essentially what I'm saying is that there is a possibility for the city to do what's right for the planet, and whether you believe in carbon, greenhouse gas and climate change and all these things or not, it's possible to do something that's good for the planet but save money at the same time. So I would urge the Commission and Council to commit to a strong...
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gardner. Oh, sorry, I don't see any questions for delegation, so we'll move on to Ms. Gardner. Thank you. And that's our last delegation of the day, folks. So we'll, once she's done, we'll go to questions for staff. If the screen lights up, I think it wouldn't hurt to take another short break before we get into the questions of staff, if there's a lot of names on there, okay? So go ahead, Ms. Gardner. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you for allowing me. Is my mic on?
There you go. You're on.
I had hoped to get here early this morning for the online booking, but my first OC Transpo bus didn't make it. So I was about an hour and a half late getting here. I'd like to talk about how the online booking is going to happen with budgeting. I have a concern. If I do online booking and I'm supposed to wait for an email to come back to me to confirm my booking, if they don't have that time available, am I going to go now back to the end of the queue to start all over? And will I end up getting a booking? So should they be hiring more staff to take care of the online booking and the call booking?
Okay. Did Mr. Scrimger, can you answer that quick, or if someone could answer that for?
So for the stage 2 solution, the ultimate solution with the full online suite, the customers will see the availability, and if their time's not available, they will choose other times or other options they might have, or at least test other options. For the interim web form, we will look at how to structure it. If we can structure it in a way that asks people for the first, second, third choice, we'll try to go for the first and offer alternatives.
Okay, thank you. I called Paratransport today at 2:03 to make my booking for tomorrow. I always wait till the afternoon. I got a call back at 2:23, and I had no problem getting my booking. I've called as late as 5 to 5 and gotten my bookings.
Okay.
So Paratransport drivers.
Sorry, Ms. Gardner, are we going to talk about the budget now? Like I got you the answer to that question because you missed the earlier presentation, but I'd like to stay on budget if we could.
No, I'm just concerned because people are saying that they need the online booking because they have to wait online for the calls. And I have to disagree with that. There's other issues with Paratransport. On October 31st, there were a number of Paratransport drivers that retired. But I don't know how many people know that they were paid $10,000, up to $10,000 each to retire. And I have to wonder where that is in the budget and why they were allowed to retire when we already are short of bus drivers. These drivers were already working overtime. Most of the drivers that I have on Paratransport are working on their days off. And I'm just wondering if there's any chance, any budgeting available to call drivers back who may have retired in the last year to help out with the service.
Okay, thank you. We've already announced that we're doing that. We're looking at reaching out with retired drivers. I don't know anything about those bonuses things, but looking to the clerk's office here, I don't think we can even get into that discussion. I think that there's privacy concerns around that. Or Mr. Manconi, is there some way you can answer that without going over a line, if you're able?
Mr. Chair, I believe the delegate is speaking about the substitution program, which is all spelled out in HR policies and rules that we have in collective agreement. But just to put everyone at ease, there is a integrated citywide team doing a massive recruitment. We actually had to book a Tom Brown Arena for the screening process and everything else to get conventional operators and paratransport operators. So we're on it.
Thank you. We're also hearing about OC Transport. They get new buses every so many years. With paratransport, we tend to get them all at once. And I'm wondering, because some of our buses are off the road for accidents and other reasons, is there any reason why we can't put it in the budget that there's so many new paratransport buses recruited every year or bought every year? Regards to paratransport hours, I know that people talked to Kyle earlier about hours in the evening. I would like to see later buses. I know for myself, I'm out late at night. I'm not young like Kyle, but I've been known to take the road from Bay Shore to Bell's Corners at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning because there are no buses left. Presto, we need to have Presto on the paratransport buses, because I can go on a bus route, I can get picked up at one spot, and there's 7 of us that get on at that one spot, and all of us have Presto. It can take us almost half an hour to get out of the parking lot. If we had the Presto machines on those buses, then it would increase the service to everybody. Moody Station, is there any way of increasing the budget for the 57 that comes to Bell's Corners? We cannot access the Moody Station that costs, I don't know how much it costs, but we're just down the street from Moody Station. But if the 57 Bell's Corners was to come through Bell's Corners and go down to Moody Station, back to Bay Shore and start over, it would help a lot of us. Because right now we're having to go all the way through Bell's Corners and all the Milk Run. But I'm just wondering whether that might save money and increase ridership if we have access to better service. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. Is there any questions of the delegation? Okay, thank you very much for coming out. Okay, let's populate the screen for questions to staff, please. Yeah, sorry, that'll be questions to staff on the budget as well as motions. You can speak to whatever you want on your turn. Okay, so is it the will of the committee? Do you want a 15-minute break before we start or get right into it? Keep going? Okay, point of order. Can we give Councillor Brockington a microphone for his point of order, please?
Mr. Chair, just on the issue of the floating day that people can take instead of a Wednesday or Sunday, and that there was some discussion with staff that they'd look into it. It's my understanding that this commission took a decision on this matter a year ago. We soundly rejected that notion. And have we, based on that decision, basically said for this term of council that we're not revisiting the item? Similar to when a city council makes a decision, you cannot revisit the same issue within the term of council. So I want to make sure we're not going down a procedural quagmire because we've already voted on this. We rejected that notion a year ago. So that's not part of my budget debate, but...
Right. No, it's a point of order.
Yeah. And I see my name's come off the screen for some reason.
We'll start with you, okay? I've looked at this side. You guys want to keep going. I need to look at that side, but I'd like to get your point of order addressed first.
Chair, yes, this would be a revisiting, so we'd need 3/4 to vote it on today.
Thank you. So we have the answer to that. Now, this side of the room, do you want to keep going or you want to break? Keep going? Okay. Okay, so then... Oh, did you say you wanted a break? Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So then, Councillor Brockington, if you want to start with questions, and we'll get organized on these motions while you get into questions, okay?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The biggest issue in my ward is bus reliability. We've had legacy bus reliability issues for years, well before LRT, further exacerbated when LRT came on. The 40 bus routes, I'm still confused. Are we adding 40 buses to provide immediate service, or are some of those 40 buses, or all of them, being held back so that when there is a problem on a particular day, they are then put into service? First question.
You're adding 40 buses. A few of those are on standby to address gaps, but 40 gets added to your base, and if you approve the budget, another 19 gets added to your base, scheduled into service across the city.
But the details of the time of day where those buses are going are not available. Is that correct?
We've given you the specifics on the memo last week. We're going to take all that and, subject to any tweaking, we'll codify that into the January schedule. So the 40 that are out there that are fixing the gaps and the issues and the overcrowding will be codified and be part of the January rollout.
But I know the routes in my ward that are going to be receiving enhancements. You gave it as part of your memo. But I can't share with my community, and I can't vote on a budget for 2020 if I don't know whether the routes in my ward are being sort of withheld in case of emergency, or whether you're actually putting additional bus service to the routes in my ward. This is the #1 priority in my ward, and I need this assurance before I vote on that today, and that's why that's been a huge issue.
So I'm going to get Pat to crisply explain what you can do, and then I will also offer that if you want to review anything that you push out to your community, we'll review that in advance with you if you'd like. Pat?
Mr. Chair, we maintain a list which we modify from time to time of exactly where the buses are assigned, either to stand by or to operate a supplementary trip. Councillor Brockington asked earlier on a different item for a list of where those are assigned in his ward, and I undertook to provide that, so I will. If the councillor wants that information today, I can go over it with him in a quiet corner before the vote, perhaps, to show him where those buses are being assigned today. And that's where they are assigned today. Where they are assigned next week and the week after will depend on feedback that we're getting from our operators, from our customers, and from our operating data. And I can also confirm that we are working on the schedules for the January period. These same routes are because they were identified as the highest priority by councillors, they remain the highest priority for us to find solutions on. The January solutions will be more robust because they'll be more baked into the schedule than the current assignments, which in some cases are more of a specific Band-Aid at a time rather than more running time over a route or longer recovery time.
The 2019 budget, $5.1 million in route enhancements. I spread that out to my community far and wide. And then when the LRT transition came in effect, we actually saw route reductions, service reductions in my ward. And that was the main issue for me, is because I basically told people the exact opposite what reality was. Yes, there were some tweaks to some routes, but that was far outweighed by the service reductions in a whole number of routes that I saw. And so as I'm trying to determine whether or not to support this budget or not, I need to ensure that the #1 priority in my ward is being addressed. That's the dilemma I have. I can't go to my people and say, yeah, I supported the 2020 budget, but we actually have worse bus service now. People are going to say, why? Why were you not advocating for stronger resources? So, Mr. Scrimshaw, I will sit with you in a quiet corner in a few minutes. The fare freeze is funded by withdrawals of the RTM payments. Is that correct?
It's funded from either I think the wording of the motion says financial and performance provisions in the project agreement.
which we're not 100% sure will be upheld by RTM through some legal challenge in the future. Is that correct? It's not guaranteed that any deduction we make from our monthly payments, they'll agree to.
They don't have to agree to it. It's in the contract.
So this is for a fare freeze guaranteed?
The funding source that you have, that we've identified is there for you to use for this purpose.
Okay, that's good. And the 40 bus routes?
The 40 bus routes right now are being funded from an additional, as I mentioned, $3.5 million we've taken from your transit capital, put that into your operating. We'll have to address that in 2021.
When council eventually agrees to increase fares, assuming that the freeze, at least for the first 3 months, is approved, what will the impact be on the required fare to bring us to an equilibrium point to ensure that the revenues equal the costs?
As we discussed, if you don't have a fare increase in 2020 at all, if you have that 2.5 does not happen in 2020, you basically, that money is gone forever out of your base. And we identified in the response that that's worth about $300 million over the life of our long-range financial plan. In order to make yourself whole, you either have to have a fare increase of 2.5% in 2020, or you have to have a 5% fare increase or some combination of it in the next couple of years to pick up that room.
So if we go with a 3-month fare freeze, assuming a fare increase will have to happen April 1st, are you saying it will have to be more than 2.5% to recoup for the first 3 months?
No. No, you've basically covered the first 3 months. Your base will go up by 2.5%. You're okay after that.
But the issue will be is if we go all year without a fare increase.
That's correct.
Okay, very well. Can you just talk to me about capital investments in 2020 to make improvements to our LRT stations? The questions I submitted, in particular Herdman, I've talked about the north-facing wall where all the stairwells exposed to the elements. You've talked about scaffolding or at least covering at Tunney Station. What specifically will be done in 2020 to make improvements in our LRT stations?
As in budget items, Councillor? Is that
Yes,
what you're
like,
looking at?
How does the budget capture?
If there's anything, okay.
Sorry, Councillor, if your question is, do we have planned enhancements to the LRT stations? No, we do not.
Okay, so the only, well, what are you doing at Tunney's Pasture right now then, from the LRT station to the end of the bus corridor?
We're adding, sorry, I should have said, other than what I've already itemized, we are adding the canopy at Tunney's to give weather protection and wind protection from the side also. We are at Herdman, we're widening the pedestrian access facility. And at Blair, we need to figure out what we do to ease some of the overcrowding and maintain some level of protection. Those are the big things we're doing. Then we're doing signage, some wayfinding things, some minor things. But in terms of large physical changes, those are the larger ones.
When I asked through my budget questions to you about Herdman in particular, the answer was a glazing system similar to the one used on the station could be constructed on the north and east side of the stairs from ground level. Design, fabrication, installation of the wall system will take several months to complete. More time is required to develop a cost estimate for this work. Were you just giving me information, or is this part of your work plan? You were just telling me how this would happen if that direction was provided?
Sorry, I apologize. Mr. Morgan's not here today, but yeah, he was trying to give you as much information as possible of what could be done.
Okay.
If we wanted to pursue that, and then we would get estimates. And
okay. On the revenue side, I asked about why there's no paid advertising in train carriages and within stations, and you referenced that that was a council decision in 2013 that there would be no advertising for the first 5 years of operation. Can you give me some background and history? Why would council basically not agree to any and all methods to raise revenues.
30 seconds left, Councillor.
Yes, certainly, and that was subsequently changed by a follow-on motion where we have to do a review after 1 year. The thinking then was that we did not want to flood the station with advertising when we had such massive changes coming for our customers, so we wanted to use all of the available space, which you've seen. So the infrastructure is in place for advertising at the stations. Those are messaging to our customers. And I believe it was Councillor Wilkinson at the time. Now we have to come back within, I believe, a year afterwards to give a review. On the light rail vehicles themselves, we strongly encourage you not to go with advertising on those vehicles. It's not just for the aesthetics, but also RTG and RTM are required to maintain those for 30 years. What happens when you put the advertising, the wraps around them and so forth, you get etching of the paint, scratches and things like that, and we're going to get into debates about maintaining the life cycle on the outside of the vehicles. The advertising is for the stations and within inside the vehicle, so you'll have another opportunity. We're required to bring you back a report.
Yeah, you've estimated that'd be about $500,000 a year in revenue, so it's nothing to sneeze at, but perhaps we can revisit that after today. I'm going to cut it there now. I may have further questions given that we're not at council, we're at commission, but I want to give others an opportunity to follow up. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. So now what we'll do is just go back to the motions for a moment. So Councillor Tierney's motion on the fare freeze. Do we need to read this out again, or is there, are we okay with doing? Okay, sorry, I'm going to change that on the advice of the clerk's office because we've got this already populated for questions to staff. So if people don't mind, you already know what the motions are. So if we continue on with the questions to staff, we'll come back and do the motions after that. Sorry for the confusion. Okay, so next up will be Commissioner Wright Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So according to the staff's response to Commissioner Caricato's inquiry regarding the financial impact of a fare freeze, the amount of revenue that would not be realized if the January 1st, 2020 proposed 2.5% increase is delayed until July 1st, 2020 would be $1.94 million. And if delayed until January 1st, 2021, would be $4.95 million. My question is it possible to use monies from the reserves to fund a fare freeze that is longer than 3 months?
Councillor, or Commissioner, sorry. The motion that you have in front of you actually comes forward with a plan to direct the general manager to look at having a fare freeze if service doesn't improve beyond March 2020. So that'll be coming back to the Transit Commission to discuss. Your contract right now with RTG allows us to recover the costs of these lost fares through them. So if you extended it, I would expect that that would be the same source of funding, but I don't know if that would hold true if you extended it and you didn't have any train issues. If in fact the service was up to meeting the standard that is set in the contract, which they are currently not meeting, if it meets the standard, I don't think you'd be able to actually charge back a cost of a fare freeze to them.
Okay, thank you. Under Transit Services Operating Resources Requirement Explanatory Notes, this is the forecast versus budget variance explanation. So it notes that there's a shortfall of $5.7 million due mainly to higher paratransport costs and to meet increased ridership demand. And this is the point that I sort of want to focus in on, lower than anticipated fare revenue from customers purchasing lower priced fares. Putting the issue of higher paratransport costs aside for the moment, am I correct in assuming that essentially there's a revenue shortfall of $1.2 million due to fewer people purchasing Presto Passes, day passes, and one-time fares?
Mr. Vice Chair, we have seen in recent years, and we are seeing in the year 2019, that people are taking advantage of the discounts that are available to them slightly more aggressively than we had forecast. So there might be more children, more students, more seniors, more people with It does not apply to EquiPass or Community Pass because those are funded from within city resources. So, but if we're carrying more students, fewer seniors, more seniors, fewer youth, anyone, if there's more people traveling in a lower fare group and fewer people traveling in a higher fare group than we projected when we set out the budget for that year, that will result in the average fare per customer being lower.
Okay. Under the 2020 pressure category explanation, under customer service representatives, do the net 2020 changes and forecasted FTE impact of an additional 1.2 million for 15 FTEs, full-time equivalents, account for staff dedicated to social media for the purposes of customer service responses as well as the service-related alerts, for example, alerts about train delays?
Yes, that was the presentation we gave you at the last meeting where we had some of that is for the customer service reps doing exactly what you described. The rest are for the station attendants.
And how many customer service reps are dedicated towards social media staff?
Sorry, currently, or does this provide in addition to?
Well, we're talking about the budget, so we'll go with what's in the budget. So currently, and what's budgeted for
The 15, my recollection is 3 would go to the messaging, 12 would go to the station attendants, and Pat, in terms of currently, right now?
Currently, the social media is being covered out of a combined pool with the customer service center. So, and even on the overnight shift, they're doing combined work. I would say there's probably 3 to 5 net people working on live information, which includes social media.
Okay, thank you. Under project information, and I'll just give the line item number so it's easier for you. It's 909764. This is station customer improvements. It's for $2.85 million. Is this the amount that is set aside for projects such as the canopy at Tunney's, the work at Herdman, and the possible work at Blair?
The work that we're doing at those stations, we're...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. The time was still going there for a bit. I'm sorry. I want to make sure I get my proper time. Councillor McKenney has taught me that.
Okay, thank you.
The work that we're doing at the stations right now is just coming out of a general account, and we're tracking it because we want to reconcile it with all of the costs that are potentially we can offset with the non-payments to RTM. This here, Pat can speak to those in terms of what this covers. So the adjustments right now at those 3 stations is we're going to look to reconcile that back to the non-payments. Pat, you can comment on these ones.
That account is used, or that account or ones like it are used each year to fund a wide range of upgrades to customer facilities at Transitway and O-Train stations, both O-Train lines. Also, sometimes it's facilities out on the street that allow operations. I mean, it's usually not bus bays, but sometimes it's a bus loop or an operational facility somewhere. Usually it's to deal with items that are identified during the budget year.
Okay, so just so I understand that the $2.85 million is not funding the current projects at Tunney's, Herdman, and possibly Blair. Those will be charged back to RTG at some point, but it is for station improvements. Does that include accessibility improvements?
It can. There is another budget also that is specifically tied to accessibility improvements.
Right, you're right, thank you. On line item 906169, which is the OLRT transition, this project is already $12.418 million over the budgeted amount of $109.9 million, with an additional $21,000 in contractual obligations. Is this overage of $109 million directly related to the delay in the launch of the LRT Line 1? And if so, will this amount be charged back to RTG?
It's the transition account to the treasurer. There's a reconciliation there that she can explain or help us explain.
So first of all, this is unfortunately because the time pressure we're on to produce these books, this is an August number. So that amount has actually changed. And what we've got charged against it now is, if you remember, when we paid RTG for the construction, we withheld mobility matters payment of roughly $34 million, and that goes against this account.
So how much are we actually over budget on this item?
I don't believe we are over budget at this point in time.
We're not, okay. All right, those are my questions for now, Mr. Vice Chair. I'll yield to other members of the commission.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner Wright-Gilbert. Commissioner Olson, please.
Thank you. I have a question of the city treasurer. So the withheld funds, the payments to RTM, can be used for the fare freeze.
The withheld funds from the maintenance can be used for whatever council or the commission decides they want to use for. They fall to the bottom line in 2019 because Mr. Manconi has a budget for that expenditure and it won't happen. So what will happen in 2019 is that surplus will end up going into your transit operating reserve.
Okay.
But in 2020, we have built into the budget those payments. If those payments do not happen, then again, this commission and council has the choice to direct Mr. Manconi to use those funds for other things.
Okay. Mr. Manconi, given the availability of the funds, could you and your staff effectively use them to improve service? I know you've said earlier that the LRT issues are not a money issue, but I assume that with more money, you could in fact improve service. Is that the case?
That's what we're doing. We're using those funds to do the mitigation measures and more as if this continues.
But could you use other funds to use to lease or buy more buses or to hire more drivers or something like that?
Well, you could always use more, but again, I don't think we have a funding issue right now. I think what we're trying to do is get the consistency on the train system. We've done the 40 plus the 20 plus the 19, so the best professional advice we have for you right now is we think that's enough.
But Mr. Manconi, it seems to be between, or choices seem to be, or to me anyway, I would like to improve service for Ottawa Transit users. I'm not sure a fare freeze actually improves service at all. It gives people something. It gives them a little something every day, but it doesn't actually put another bus on the road. And what I wonder is that money perhaps better spent trying to improve service by getting more capacity on the road?
Commissioner, I would caution you because you're dealing with the 2020 budget. We know we're making deductions in their 2019 payments. If service improves to the point where they're meeting the standard, we won't be making those deductions. So to say that we're going to commit that money to something else in 2020, when we have a contractual obligation that we may have to pay them, you run the risk that you're going to spend it twice.
I understand that, and I don't want to spend it twice. And that's why I said to Mr. Manconi, could you effectively use that, knowing that it's not a guaranteed source of funds in the future? Could you use, in fact, the money that is there now, that is being potentially earmarked for the fare freeze? Could that be used effectively to augment service?
I'm just going to, sorry, I have to add some clarity to that. We are not using the deduction money for the fare freeze. We are using the provisions within the contract that we have with RTG. There are financial and performance penalties in there. That is what we will use for the fare freeze. The deductions that we're taking right now, Mr. Manconi is using for the 40 buses that he's put on right now, with the extension of all of the changes he's making in the stations. So the money is not sitting there. I don't actually expect a lot to fall to the bottom line. It's actually being put into use right now.
I apologize, but I'm reading the motion then incorrectly because it says the anticipated revenue reduction, fare revenue reduction of $980,000 to be funded from the anticipated funds from the financial and performance provisions. So those funds, those $980,000, which are potentially to be used for the fare freeze, could be, doubt it will pass this group, but could be used to augment service, even on a short-term basis. But what the question to Mr. Manconi is, could you actually take that $980,000 and effectively improve service in the short term even?
Sorry, I'm just thinking, we added the 40 buses, we're doing the station improvements.
No, but
doing the 20.
but that's a different source. The 980,000 can't be spent twice. So it can be spent it can be funded, the 980,000, the revenue reduction, be funded from the anticipated funds from the financial and performance provisions in the project agreement.
It should actually
Correct?
clarify that. It should
Okay,
it's
let's
say
clarify
that it's from the financial and performance provisions in the project agreement applied in 2020. So the money isn't there right now. The money that's there is the deductions, which Mr. Manconi is using to do everything he's doing to increase the reliability.
Okay.
Going into 2020, we are anticipating using other provisions within the contract, we will be able to recover that 980,000. We don't have that in hand at this moment.
Okay, then I ask that the motion be clarified, just so that we're very clear on what the source of funds is and what it is not. Okay, Mr. Manconi, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Can that source of fund, the financial and performance provision, also be used for a 6-month fare freeze, a 9-month, 12-month? Well, I just want to know what the difference would be, why the arbitrary number of 3?
The
Except for
decision was made by the chair and the mayor to put forward a 3-month. That's what we were asked for. If in fact service performance is not achieved, the general manager has been directed to come forward to extend it, just like we did this year when the train wasn't in operation. And at that time, if it is the service, the performance is not where it needs to be, then again, you would be able to recover that through the financial and performance provisions of the project agreement.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, that in a month from now, service is has enhanced to the point where we expect it to, and we're happy with that. Would we then cancel the next 2 months of the fare freeze?
So with this direction, you are going to put this into place January 1st, so to April 1st. So they would have to come back, Mr. Manconi would have to come back and ask you if you wanted to change that, if performance was where you wanted it to be. But with this direction, it's in for 3 months, period.
So what's stopping us from putting it in for 12 months? And then if service improves to the point where we're happy with it, you can come back to us in 4 months, 6 months, 9 months. I just wonder why we wouldn't extend that to our riders, some assurance that we are going to ensure that they're paying, that they're going to continue to get the fare freeze, because today, service is not where we want it to be.
Councillor, again, just giving you advice, I think that would be a risky thing to do, giving this false impression that the negative service elements that initially started will continue for that period of time. I think we'll be into much more severe discussions if this continues for the period of time that you're suggesting. Quite frankly, you know, I think what's going to happen here is RTG is going to step up their game very dramatically, and you're going to see continuous improvements, and we might be back in here saying we don't have that anticipated revenue stream, and you may have to suspend that sooner. But we're going to use all the levers we can. Professional advice is don't go down that path that you just suggested, because I can't see RTG, RTM bleeding that much that it just wouldn't be sustainable for them. They would bring in everything they could to, and they are bringing in everything they can to get things improving. And again, give credit where credit is due. They are improving.
Well, I'll give that some thought. Right now, I'm considering an amendment to the motion because I do think we should have that pressure on them. Can we just talk quickly now about the seniors pass versus the Equipass? What is a seniors pass, a monthly seniors pass?
I'll just turn to that page. This is on page 4 of the document. A senior's monthly pass currently $45.50 per month,
And how much is?
Recommended for 2020, $46.75 a month.
46.75. And how much is an Equipass?
An Equipass is currently $58.25, and the budget proposes no increase in that.
Right.
So a seniors pass is at a 62% discount from full fare. An Equipass would be moving to a 52.5% discount from full
So
fare.
without naming any rich seniors, all seniors right now enjoy transit at a much reduced rate of, say, a family of 4 earning $39,000. Is that correct?
Seniors have a lower fare, a lower pass fare. I'm going to check cash fares in a second.
No, I mean monthly.
On monthly passes,
Yeah.
the senior pass is more deeply discounted than the Equipass.
So a senior who is not living in poverty, which many, many aren't in this city, is enjoying a much deeper discount than, say, a family of 4 earning $39,500 a month. Is that correct? Say 40. We'll round it up.
I don't know the details of the low-income cutoff, assuming that that is someone who's eligible for
It's
the
about
Equipass.
39.5,
Then,
yeah.
yes.
So, Chair, I would like to give direction to staff. It is a political decision. It's not a decision based on any need. And it's one that we have to, as a commission and as a council, decide what we're comfortable with. And so I would like to give a direction to staff for council to come back and give us what the cost differential would be in operating costs to offer 2 days of no-cost transit to individuals living below the poverty line, similar to Equipass, and how that compares to seniors, and what the difference would be if we just added it on, or if we remove seniors and made that 2 day of no cost to people. Is that an okay direction?
I trust you're writing that down for our friends in the clerk's office?
Yeah, I can write it down. Yeah.
Perfect, thank
Okay.
you.
I would have a question, Mr. Chair, and that I'd need some clarification in order to provide the correct information back. Would the question be, what would be the cost to give 2 days of free travel for people who are currently Equipass registrants, because that is a number we have, or a projection of how many people are low income but have not yet applied for an Equipass, because that would be a much harder number for us to estimate.
No. What would be the cost of offering 2 no-cost days of transit to residents, any resident who is living as low income in the city?
Okay, is that it?
No, just a few more questions, thanks. On page 12 of the budget, there is, and this is just for clarification, payment to RTG Line 1 maintenance. Can you just explain what it's $680,000? Could you just explain what that is? Have we already paid them some of the maintenance costs?
So that is the inflation on the maintenance for the year 2020. If you remember, when we entered into the contract way back when in 2012, it was set that they were going to receive so much for maintenance payments, and it was actually supposed to start in 2018. So we had that built into the budget. We now have to add on inflation because that is part of the contract.
So even though they weren't finished, we have to pay them inflation on a maintenance contract?
That's for 2020. So
Okay.
we're adding it in for 2020 because it's a full year of operating. And
Okay,
yes,
got you.
the
It's not for
contract-
2019, 2018?
No, it's not for
Okay,
2019.
Okay, thank you. And just, again, this is just clarification. Page 28 of the budget, it talks about replacement of operational support vehicles for $1.8 million. And it talks about 30 operational support vehicles. I gather those are like SUVs and stuff. But on page 38.
30 seconds left,
It's,
Councillor.
yeah, it's, they say it's only for 20. And I just wonder, is it for 20 or 30? I mean, do you know? I mean, you could give me this later. Sorry, so in one place, it just says that there are 30 replacement vehicles, and in another place, it says there are 20.
if you could just provide where the 20 is, the reference?
Yeah, the 20 is on page 38.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the reference on page 38, it's actually just the line got cut off. It's operation support vehicles. It should read replace in 2020. The second 20 was cut off.
Oh, it's not replace 20, okay.
Okay, so Councillor, now it's Commissioner Caracato's time. If you have more questions, we can put
I'll
you
go back on.
Thank you. Commissioner Caracato?
Thank you. If I can ask Marion a question about the 300 million that you've estimated for, I guess, the lifetime if we do propose a fare freeze for a year. Can you explain to me how that works?
So you basically have, you're taking out 5 million if you don't do the fare increase in 2020. In the next year, that it's, you're missing that 5 million again, plus your fare increase of, you would have had a 2.5% on that 5 million. So it's actually a little bit more than 5 million, and that goes on for 30 years. So the compounding effect of having that taken out of your base in your very first year, when you add it all together, it takes $300 million out of your overall financial plan.
Okay, thanks. Questions about para-transpo now. Back in the spring, we talked about reducing the amount of time users of the system have to wait on the phone, and I believe, Pat, you let us know you were in the process of hiring customer service representatives to reduce that time, and so I was just looking for an update on how many you've hired, and are you at capacity now?
We continue to hire. We also continue to have attrition. We are keeping up. We are making some we are not keeping up. We are making some progress, but as people leave for other work, we are required to hire for their replacements as well. We are doing better than we were, but we are not at full strength.
So how many do you have working there?
I can get you that information and get it back to you. I don't have it here today.
Okay. In response to one of Commissioner Wright-Gilbert's questions to John Manconi, it says the 2019 forecast over expenditure of 5.419 million is primarily due to one-time and permanent service level adjustments for para-transpo. Can you explain what that is?
Mr. Chair, the one-time adjustments with regards to para-transpo is to meet the current ridership demands that we're seeing.
So was it spent on trips, like using taxis, both?
That is correct. It'd be a combination of both our in-house minibuses and contracted taxis.
Okay, because it's certainly not on new vehicles or repairing vehicles, as we heard from a lot of the delegations today, right?
That is correct. It would be on service delivery, trips provided to customers.
And I think the plan is not to buy any new para buses until 2022?
That is correct.
Do you think that's a good timeline, or should we be buying them sooner?
So, Commissioner, there's a lot of history to those vehicles. Believe it or not, part of the reason we're in this challenge about the life cycle of these vehicles is there was a replacement capital fund that wasn't tapped into because there was a lot of stalling as to whether or not Paratranspo would go out to the private sector again. So before you're even on this commission, years ago, and part of the challenges you're hearing about Para is it's been totally reconstructed from the ground up. Paratranspo used to go out to the private sector, and the vehicles that were being used were not friendly for our customers at all. They had elevated lifts. They didn't have the suspensions they wanted. So part of the many decisions that were made were to accelerate the acquisition of those vehicles. Unfortunately, that led to the entire fleet needing to be replaced. In the perfect world, we'd be staggering that replacement like we do with the bus fleet. Mr. Greer is looking into that possibility. They're on 7-year life cycle, and that meets the affordability, but also we believe that's the right churn for those vehicles.
Okay, thanks. And just on the $2 million that's in this budget for Paratranspo, can you confirm if the $900,000 on page 35 of the draft budget, item 909773, technology systems, Paratranspo, will be used in conjunction with funds from the 2019 budget to fund the $1.5 million expected cost to design, test, and implement the new online system delivery?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that that is not. The online booking system is fully funded, as we reported earlier. This is additional funds for future technology requirements.
Okay. Such as?
Mr. Chair, such as described here, for continuing maintenance and upgrades to the suite of software used for workforce management, customer bookings, dispatch, and timekeeping. This is money that will, as required, allow us to move from version to version as that software continues to be upgraded. So it would likely be used for not the implementation for online booking, but for a future version upgrade of that as we go from version 2018 or 2017 up to version 2019 or 20, whatever is current at the time.
And you need that money in this year's budget?
We need that money so that we need that authority for that money so we can start procurement processes. As you can see here, we're projecting that the year that we would complete spending on that project would be 2023.
Okay, and more on the online service. Can you confirm that the additional operating costs associated with the implementation of the online service will be identified as a budget pressure in 2021 operating budget and encourage the Transit Commission Council to support for adequately funding this important service to Ottawa's citizens?
Commissioner, can we get through the 2020 budget and save questions on the 2021 budget till a later date, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Thank you.
All righty. Just going back to the 20 buses, if I understand, that'll be the R1 replacements that'll be held at the, I guess it's the Ottawa Champions Baseball Diamond. Can you tell us what the cost is for that on a monthly or a weekly basis, whatever you have?
I don't have those here, but we can certainly provide those to you.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be helpful. And is the plan to have those just until the issues with LRT are resolved, or is this sort of for the rest of 2020?
It's fluid, like I've said. For now, it's until all these issues are resolved, so we're taking a very conservative approach. I want to get through winter and see what's coming, but for now, it's until the issues are resolved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just wanted to clarify, I think it was Riley's motion with the family pass. I didn't hear an answer on that. Is there a cost for that, or have we worked with staff? Who's put this together?
Mr. Chair, we do not have a means to calculate. There could be a cost, there could be a revenue increase, or it could be cost neutral. It is uncharted territory for us. If there were a cost, it would be from people who are currently traveling together at the same time on those days and paying two separate fares. If there is a revenue increase, it would be from new groups, new family groups traveling on transit who are not making those trips today. And if it's neutral, it would be a balance of those two.
Okay, so it's a little difficult to vote on something without any kind of cost. The other thing that just of note, and it's just a friendly amendment, it might be captured in there, is related to, you mentioned March break in your periods. I wrestle with this all the time with the French boards and the English boards. They have very dramatic different dates, and I don't know how you would qualify who's who in that group. So I guess that would have to be just another consideration in this evaluation, I guess you could say. Something, I don't know how we
Our
note that.
check so far is that for the year 2020, they are aligned. The March break dates are aligned. I believe the March break dates are different in the province of Quebec, but our initial indication is that the March breaks are
They got
aligned
it
between
in line this year?
all four of the school boards.
Hallelujah.
That's our information.
I run programming at the Splash Pool, and it's always a challenge. So, okay, great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to just approach this question of, is there enough money in the budget to provide the reliability and level of service we're expecting? I want to approach it from a different angle. Undoubtedly, if we're adding 40 buses plus 19 new buses, the service will improve. I'm really trying to make sure we can set the right expectations for riders as to what that means. There's a number of measurements or policy that OC Transpo has that this commission and council has set over the years around the number of trips provided, around expansion into new residential areas, around frequency of route depending on time of day and so on. The one that's easy to find on the website is having buses no more than 5 minutes late 90% of the time. And there's even some policy around planning for standing room on buses during peak times versus non-peak. So my question is, does the budget and the plan that we have in front of us allow OC Transpo to meet these levels of service that council has directed you to meet under previous policy and direction?
My response to that, Chair, and it is a very good question, is we're not sure. And the reason we're not sure is this is a massive change to your entire system. And I'm glad you brought up all those policies because, as you've heard some of the speakers and Pat touch on them, those policies drive service levels, fare box ratio recovery. You know, my line is, theoretically, it's never enough. You could always use more to make it better for everybody. There will always be some people that are not satisfied when you have policies that restrict you in a bottomless pit because, you know, the reason, if you go back many years ago, your fare box ratio was going down. It was, you were subsidizing transit every year over year over year. That led to high fare increases, 7%, those types of things. That was to catch up on the fare box recovery. I think we need to be careful about getting through this difficult transition. In the perfect world, we would have landed this much better. We would have had more reliable service. The tweaking would have been done on the bus. We would have got increased ridership, which looks like we're getting, and then we could have a good discussion about fare box ratio and long-term affordability. My caution to you is careful adding so many costs from your envelope, your tax base or your fares, that you start to drive the fare box ratio down. You'll put yourselves and future councils at jeopardy and your long-range financial plans at jeopardy. And to your point, Councillor, those, you know, I hear people say that, you know, my bus is full, I'm not sitting. That's because you have a policy in that regard. And there was discussion, healthy discussion about you want your buses to be full because that's how you recover as much as you can. Council can always open up those policy discussion points down the road and look at fare box ratios. This is a difficult year on many fronts for us. And I wish I had that beautiful crystal ball to tell you we're going to make everybody happy and it's going to work perfectly. And I know that's not what you're suggesting. I don't have that in front of me. I wish we would have had better rail service so we didn't have the amount of disruptions we had right now. And our goal, as I've said in my opening comments, is to make it as best we can for our customers and get some of the burden off your shoulders because you're getting inundated with the calls and the complaints. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I don't have the perfect answer for you.
I guess it does and it doesn't. I think as commissioners, one thing we need to do is assess the risk, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now in our transit system. And I think we need to look past the short term for sure. I think have some optimism and confidence that some of the short-term issues are going to be resolved, whether it takes 1 week or whether it takes a month or whether it takes 3 months, they will be resolved. If we can get that out of the way, we maybe have a little bit more certainty and understanding of what is in front of us for 2020, but there's still a lot of risk in this budget, just as there was back in February and March of last year when we were looking at the 2019 budget. I hope you could say with some confidence, I'm looking at the 261, which was the most on-time 200 series bus in the first 6 months of 2019, 32% of those buses were late. So I hope we're a lot closer to where we should be, which is the 90% on-time rate. I look at business areas in my community, Ybor Road, for example, and there's others across the city that have told us we have a shift that begins at 7. It's nowhere near where the bus service begins. So having the flexibility to address those things, and then growth areas, right? Do we have, yes, these additional buses are going towards growth areas, but is it enough to meet the demands and the speed at what some of our communities are growing? So I understand the uncertainty, and I know you can't give a 100% answer on that, but I think it's something that I think many of us are struggling with around the table is the uncertainty and the risk in this budget in front of us. There's so much we don't know, and I wish we did before we had to say yes or no in our recommendation to council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be very similar to Councillor Brockington. All I'm getting is concerns about bottlenecks of problems, and they're on certain routes, and I really like the idea of being able to work together to get through them. And I just need some assurance, because if I vote on this budget and people have not gotten, they're still having more than, half-hour delays of getting to work, and I'm getting stories of people looking at quitting their jobs, and just total frustration. What guarantees do I have to tell them that this budget will resolve these issues?
What you could tell them is, if I had to share that experience, and I would, and I have, is that the data that we're seeing since we deployed the 40 buses is that the daily cancellations of routes is down. And a reminder, last year we were hitting 150, 200 cancellations a day. We've been down to 0, 10, 15, 20. So that's 99.5, 99.8% of service delivered. The 20 buses for the R1 preserves that, so that'll keep things much better intact. The 19 buses addresses some of the growth areas, the reliability issues, and then I think it is about having the tough conversations of, like the people that have asked me, why do I have a double transfer? When I explained it to them, I was very frank and honest and said, there's nothing we can do to change that, because to do a change on that for a very small percentage of our ridership would mean very significant costs to you and erosion of service. So it's the sum of the parts. Good, reliable train service equals much improved bus service across the network. And we are seeing some of that reliability increase. I think some of the outstanding challenges are the overcrowded buses, which we hope to fix with some of that investment that if you approve this budget. So things are trending in the right direction. RTG and RTM need to deliver. That helps us all. And the investments that you have here help across the board.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I hear from residents is that they see, they're waiting an extra long time for a bus, and then they see back-to-back buses. They see the same bus back-to-back, and it's happened a few times, and it's just one of those ongoing headaches, and we've passed it on to your team. But I'm hoping that in those efficiencies that we're seeing them spread out, that they're not back-to-back, because there's nothing more frustrating than waiting for something for a long, long time, and then there's two in a row that aren't going to do you much good. Can we see some improvements on that? Will those buses help? Because the 40 buses you're talking about, we're not necessarily applying to the routes that have been raised with me. It was not listed.
Mr. Chair, if you ever see two buses back to back, it is usually because one bus is late and the other one is on time, or sometimes very close to on time. One of the highest priorities of the work we're doing with the 40 buses and with the new schedules for January is to, based on data that we've collected, on the routes that you identified as priorities, check to see that the scheduled time for each route is correct from one end to the other. We have found some routes which have an excess of time where we need to take some time out because those buses are running early, and a bus that's running early is the same as a bus that's not there for many customers. And we've seen a larger group of routes where there isn't enough time in the schedule to get from one end to the other. When we make that change in January and continued through the year as we continue to do that analysis and then make those changes, those buses then have the capability of running closer to on time. That anytime buses are running better on time, there will be less bunching. But it won't go away instantly with a new schedule change because it's very, very influenced by what's happening on the roads and what's happening with customers at that moment, at that location, on that day.
Thank you, because the last thing I want to do is have less service. I'm hoping that we're going to increase and that we're going to have new riders all the time. And but it's all word of mouth, and we need to have these riders satisfied so they can spread the word and pass it on. Is there anything in the budget about communication, about building into getting new riders, about doing focus groups on people who aren't currently taking transit to get them interested in transit? Is there any look forward of how we can get more people on buses?
Yes, I believe I mentioned that earlier on, that we want to bring forward a marketing plan. We did have a follow-up to our Ready for Rail campaign, but we had to suspend that because of the hardships that our customers faced. So we have there was a continuum of that, and then we're going to bring forward a very aggressive marketing plan to get people onto the system. Right now, our focus is on taking care of those people that are not getting the service that's supposed to be delivered to them.
Okay, thank you. I hope to continue working with you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. Just some further questions. The agreements we have with Ottawa's post-secondary institutions where the students have voted to have a pass embedded in the fees that they pay, how long are those agreements for?
The agreements are now what the lawyers call evergreen. They continue until canceled.
So that revenue is gold?
As long as the universities and colleges continue to, then yes.
Okay. The budget forecasts a ridership increase in 2020 of 2.6%. Can you tell me how you came up with that number?
It's a number which is cautiously optimistic. There's been people who have suggested huge ridership increases will come immediately upon opening a rapid transit line. We are in a different circumstance in Ottawa because we've been replacing a rapid transit line which was served by buses to a rapid transit line that's served by trains. It's in recognition of the fact that the detours have ended, that many people have shorter travel times or will have shorter travel times once service is fully reliable, and the continued growth of the economy. It's proving to be, so far, because we've seen ridership up in the range of 3.5% in both September and October, it makes us think that that 2.6, I think it was, percent may be, you know, a good number to go with.
And what percentage of these people will be new riders to the system versus existing riders who happen to be taking more trips?
Our methods don't allow us to distinguish between the two. We recognize more, so I would say we see a difference. We will see an increase. If when ridership is higher, it's because we see an increase in the number of passes we sell and the number of single ride fares. When more passes are sold, we know that's more individuals because anyone who buys a pass has unlimited travel. When we see more single ride fares, we cannot tell whether it's one person making more trips or whether it's another person making a new trip.
So you're forecasting the ridership will go up 2.6%. How much will revenues go up?
I believe that number's in the presentation. So I'm going to turn to the presentation.
When you factor out
When I find it.
our inflationary increase of 2.5%, just take that out of the equation, how much are we expecting to get more in revenues from what I would conclude an increase in ridership?
Sorry for the delay as
It's okay.
I turn to the page, which I think is page 7. I'll have to look. Marion, do you know where 2019 revenue is? I see 2020 revenue.
We have roughly, you have the 5 million built in for the fare increase, but you actually have revenue increase of 1.8 million for the additional, for the service expansion.
Okay. I only raise this because it's a risk. Budgets are estimates, and you want to make sure your estimates are as accurate as possible. And given the current climate of public transportation in the system, I would be hesitant to say we're attracting new people at this point in time. New people are probably going to wait until the system gets all the kinks out before they start to pay the big money for a monthly pass or some other pass. And so that's why I'm trying to better understand your 2.6% increase in ridership, because we're counting on some of those revenues to balance our budget. And that's why I want to make sure I understand your methodology. Just to go back to the family pass and one of Councillor Tierney's concerns, I believe this will be a net revenue positive. I believe that if you're a family of 4 or 5 and you look at the cost to go one way from your community to, let's say, downtown, and then the cost to come back, that could be $25. A family pass is $10.75. And so people aren't taking the bus in that case. They're saying, well, it's cheaper for us to drive, or we just won't travel as much. But if you offer a family pass more times throughout the year, I think you're going to attract more people. So I don't see this as we're going to lose money. I see it as it's going to be an attraction, if it's marketed properly, to attract more people to take the system. And that's why the way it's worded, this is a test. We're going to test it for a year, and we're going to come back in a year and discuss it further. So I'd hope that folks discuss this, or sorry, approve this today. One change I'd like to make, Mr. Chair, to my own motion is to add the family day, the holiday that we have in February, to that. I believe Councillor Kavanagh has made that suggestion, and I would just like to amend my motion to add Family Day to the list of days that we're going to pilot in 2020.
So a total of how many days is this going to be now?
Well, you know, includes the summer months, so it's, when you add Christmas, March break, summer, you're looking at about 80 days, Mr. Chair, approximately.
80 days, okay.
Approximate, I haven't counted,
Okay, no, fair enough.
but I wanted to address that. The whole point of my suggestion for a free day in the infancy days of the LRT, which later morphed into Remembrance Day, was to draw non-commuters to the system. And we were to market that free day and target people, supposed to be on a Sunday, to get them onto the system. So going back to Councillor Kavanaugh's question about, do we have plans in place in 2020 to market to people and convert non-public transit users to the public transit system? The ultimate goal that I was trying to go at for that free day was to introduce people, hey, come on the system, it's free, bus, LRT, use the LRT, see what is happening in the city, and get them on that. But I definitely believe there are multiple opportunities to do that going forward. Finally, I just want to restate my comment at the beginning about my significant reluctance with this budget to address the number one issue in my ward, and that is the bus reliability, which has been a chronic issue. It has not improved after the October 6th transition when the number of bus routes changed. And although a number of routes in my ward were identified in Mr. Manconi's memo last Friday, the details that I can communicate back to my community have not been shared with me. So I have a great reluctance supporting this budget because at this point I don't see how the number one issue in my ward is being addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor McKinney, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just come back to paratranspo service expansion. I note that there's no FTE impact associated with the $2 million increase in the operational budget. I'd just like to know, will this include any increase in the number of buses, any increase in the number of drivers? What exactly are we looking at with this $2 million?
It's the use of the taxi program for expansion of trips through the Coventry connections.
So what does that mean? And so again, being asked to approve the budget this evening, and I also have some reluctance because I'm not sure that we've addressed really the need for our para customers. We have another year to go before they will see a real online booking, and I just want to understand what the impact for them will be going into 2020. And what do you see as the service enhancement?
They will see between 55,000 and 70,000 more trips to accommodate the ridership increase, as per slide 6 of my deck. That's what $2 million gets you.
And what does that mean? What does that mean? Proportionately? Is that increasing their service by 10%, by 5%?
So if we can go to slide 6, we do 900,000 trips right now, so you're adding between 55 and 70,000. Pat, what's that as a percentage?
So about 5%.
Up to an 8% increase.
8, okay. Okay, and do you feel that this will, I'm asking honestly, do you feel that this will provide para customers with the service level that other riders are accustomed to, expect in terms of wait times?
It's the sum of the parts will give you more for the customers. So you'll have the online booking, you'll have the phone, the portal, you'll have this, and then down the road we'll bring you the policy paper on how you can mine out even more trips without even having to add to the budget, or if you want to keep all your policies in place and get ready. Those are difficult discussions on eligibility criteria. trip restrictions. You heard about people going to social events. Do we want to start to throttle that down and make it an essential service just for core types of trips? That's all the tough discussions which we've had with the user groups, and a caution, we can't get consensus on that. But if council wants to invest more without and keep everything intact, we can do that. We can even go back to unpacking the decision as to when we brought the service in-house. You want to expand your fleet, you can add to that. You can bring more service in-house. You can contract it all out. It's all about money and policy discussion, and that's why Councillor Gower raised an important point earlier on about, you know, if you want to have a holistic discussion about paratranspo and planning for the future and making it meet everybody's objectives, you got to have difficult discussion on all those things. The budget that's before you is a balanced budget, bringing in all the levers that we have. The treasurer mined out the $2 million for us to put towards this. I know, Councillor, you and I have talked about adding trips. Online booking is there. And down the road, if you want to have more wholesome discussions about how you can do more with less or more with more, we're happy to do that policy discussion.
I'm a more with more from, more with more believer. I think that for me, what I'm looking for in the end is parity. I want to make sure that people who are mobility challenged in any way are able to move about the city in the same way that I can and have the same options that I do. Understanding that they'll be different, but that, that there will be that equity in place. So thank you for that. I think I understand the 2 million a bit better. So we'll go to motions, and I will be asking to amend Councillor Tierney's motion just to make it the exact same, but make it for 12 months.
And Councillor, before we get to there, you'll figure out where the balance of that money's coming from beyond the 3 months?
Yeah, from the exact same place that is identified in the motion right now, from the financial performance provisions.
Okay, so thank you, everybody, for your questions. I've got just a couple, and they're related to the motions. I want to thank Mr. Manconi and our treasurer and all their staff for the work on this budget. It's just a few questions here, too. So first, let's start with Councillor Kavanagh's motion. I want to go back to legal. They suggested that this would be reconsideration. So I just want to be clear. So if 3/4 of the commission members present vote to reconsider this item, we can put it back on the table? Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair, thanks.
Okay. And to be clear with Councillor Kavanagh, you want to put this on, but at a zero cost? You're not looking for money to implement this if they come up with the idea that there's going to be costs here? You're not comfortable with staff just working on this, trying to figure it out? You want to actually include it in the budget. So for how much? Do we know? Yep. Can we get a mic for Councillor Kavanagh, please?
Thank you. It says right in the motion to report back with information on the feasibility of implementing this proposal. So I think it's pretty clear that this is something that is budget related in the fact of the future, but at this point, it's they're going to be looking at the feasibility. So they're going to report back with information. And I think Mr. Scrimgeour said it well in terms of that it could be have an effect if it, but at this point, it is just information that we're asking for. And I believe that that would be forthcoming.
I'm looking to staff to see if they can answer that for us. If we include this as part of the budget process, is it considered that there's funds being committed to this, an unknown amount?
Chair, just trying to be helpful and manage expectations. I want to be crystal clear. I've just confirmed with Pat again. I wasn't privy to the conversation they had yesterday or whenever it was. We cannot implement this now. There's no way we can implement this now.
That's right.
And if we're directed to implement it now or in the future, I'm going to warn you, there's going to be costs. Nothing is for free for reprogramming for the fare gates and also the back office with Metrolinx. So there will be a cost, and we cannot implement this now. So I'm just, again, I'm trying to be helpful in terms of managing expectations around what's before you.
Thank you. So if Commission's okay, I'll save my questions on the other two motions we'll deal with this now. Do we want to, if we take this under reconsideration now, as Mr. Manconi said, they can't implement it without dollar figures attached to it. Yeah. The councillor is in agreement that if this motion fails, staff will stop working on it for this year. So do we want to take this on, or do we want to leave it with Mr. Scrimgeour to try to work out?
I don't think that was the sense, because this is asked to review it. And so I don't think that we're...
Well, you just told you they can't implement it without funding, and we don't know the funding. So you want it done as part of the budget? You don't want it done as their goodwill that they're working on people with it, or outside of the budget discussion?
I'll get Mr. Scrimgeour's comments on it.
Ask them to do more?
If he's willing to work on it, then we're fine.
Correct?
If he states that they're looking at it, I'm fine with that.
So then we're withdrawing the motion?
Can I have it as an inquiry?
So I'm just clarifying with Mr. Scrimgeour, and we all know he always wants to help everybody. I want to manage expectations. He doesn't have capacity to take this on. It looks simple on the surface, but it's meetings, it's flying down to Toronto to meet with Metrolinx and to convince them to do certain back office stuff, reprogramming. So I don't know where he's going to get the capacity to do it, and I don't want to let you down, Councillor, by us saying, yes, we'll take it as direction, and then we get into the situation, where is this in the priorities of things? So what he just told me, I said, why are we agreeing to this? If he's saying if we're directed, we'll do it, but it's not going to come to the top of the list is the issue. This will drag on for some time, and as you know, we have lots and lots of priorities. We heard about online booking, we heard about stabilizing the system, route meetings, rolling out new service, all that. We're just adding on. It's my job to manage him and his staff to meet expectations. So if you give direction, I'd suggest we bring this back as part of that report I was talking earlier on about checking in with you. I'd be happy to add this to the list to see where we can fit it in down the road, but I just don't want you leaving the room thinking that this is going to come up to the top of the list.
I don't think there was an expectation it was going to be on the top of the list. This was strictly a review, as it states, and to look into it. And I don't believe it would be more than, looking at the feasibility. If it's, if it's not feasible, then you'll report back, and then we'll hear the explanation. But it's not a deep digging. This is looking at the feasibility.
I've given you my answer. It is not feasible. I know the Metrolinx system. I was there from the ground up. It is not programmable to do this. I've asked the question. So if you're looking for the feasibility of doing this now, it is not feasible. If you're looking at the future, when there's upgrades, lots of work, Metrolinx will want a scoping document. They'll want to know the costs, funding source. We have to give them money to do the engineering fees and so forth.
I'm happy to remove the word now and just look at in the future.
Okay,
And we're
Councillor,
not
but
saying
you're
top of
asking
the
for
list.
it to be part of the budget piece right now. So that's what we're asking you. Do you want us to go to a vote? It has to, we've got to get 3/4 of the commission to agree that we're going to deal with this right now as a budget item, okay? Or do you want to withdraw the motion again and do it either as an inquiry or allow Mr. Scrimgeour to try to work that when they're doing changes in the future so that maybe there's not a whole lot of a cost to this to us. It doesn't, any of that doesn't need to take place here right now as part of the budget discussion as we explained to you.
Okay.
But you came back to me and you said you wanted it as in the budget. So are we doing reconsideration or not?
I will ask that it just be an inquiry, and then
An
we'll
inquiry?
remove it as a budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Manconi, that works for you?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so that's off the table. Now, on Councillor Brockington's motion, The question I have with, we're at approximately 80 days. First off, I'll say right up front, Councillor, I love your idea of a family day pass. I know there's other councillors and commissioners coming up with all kinds of ideas on how to give away free days and change the new passes, create new passes and everything. But I find all this is going to have impacts on the long-term financial plan for OC Transport. So in the new year, I'll give the new treasurer a heads up, are going to be asking that staff update that long-term plan because, Mr. Manconi, correct me if I'm wrong, but because of some of the passes we added over the last couple of years, the revenue has become a little bit unpredictable. Is that fair to say? Harder for you to budget?
It goes back to what Pat was talking about in terms of customers are making their choices. The Presto system is doing what it was intended. People are able to not buy a pass and go pay as you go. So that is affecting it. So hopefully that'll attract more riders and revenue will go up with the rail system. So, but yeah, revenue's all over the map.
We all want revenue to go up, but I think we also have a responsibility to taxpayers to not do things that could cause revenue to drop drastically. And so my concern with this is the period of 80 days for this. I'm looking for staff to give an answer because I see in the motion here that you're saying that you'll cover any costs through operating budget and transit reserve fund. So to me, we're giving a blank check on the reserve fund if we pass this. So I'm looking for some indication from staff. And this, your answer can be used by other councillors and commissioners when they're looking for free pass days. How is the best way to approach this? Should we be looking at a smaller example, like maybe March break, and the council wants family day added in there? Is that an example that we can then compare year over year? Will you be able to give us an answer that's revenue neutral before the summer piece that is mentioned in here? I'm just concerned with the total number of days here.
He wanted to start March break.
Yeah, March break and family day and then all summer.
Sorry, Chair, I was just chatting with the
I appreciate
treasurer. And
you didn't know ahead of time.
We're
about
stumped a bit here. I mean, we just want to give you the best advice, so. The short answer is we need some time to analyze this because the councillor may be right that they could be cost neutral, but I don't have the data to tell you what the impacts would be. So it could go one way or the other.
So do you need this motion to be part of the budget? Because to me, it's sounding like a blank check piece. And I'm wondering if we can work with the council to, if you're going to analyze this, to try to do something outside of the budget so that there's no budget funds committed to it, but see if we can't do it and create a blueprint for others to use on that want to create different passes.
I'm going to look to the clerk's department. Perhaps a solution could be and implement if budget neutral. I don't know if that could be added to the motion.
Okay.
To,
Would that be, well, I'll get your answer before I ask the councillor if that's a friendly amendment then.
Yes, Chair, that's possible.
Would you be okay with that, Councillor Brockington? It's the intent of your motion to be revenue neutral, correct? Or revenue positive?
Again, I don't think there's going to be a cost. I think what you're worried about is if people who normally pay for multiple family members now pay one pass, we're going to lose money. There'll be a net decrease of revenues to the system. And staff are saying that will be covered off through this fund. And I think you're rightly so to ask the question, we can't have an infinite amount of drawing from that fund. I'm arguing that I don't think that's going to be the case, but the whole point of this motion is to give staff 1 year to assess the situation, and we'll come back and talk about the budget impacts when we're debating 2021 and whether or not it's viable to go forward.
it still has an impact on the 2020 budget if we tell them to go ahead. Like if we leave this room announcing that, or sending a motion to council recommending the family day pass be funded through transit reserves or operating budget, and something unforeseen at this moment comes up and there's a $1 million or several $1 million hit to the budget, that money has to come from somewhere.
And so
how do you want to handle that? Do you want to cover the overrun if it happens, or are you open to the idea that staff analyze your idea and try and do it as revenue neutral and not be as prescriptive that it's 80 days? Are you okay with that? That maybe we do Family Day and March break and see how it works?
No, I would like transit commissioners to vote on my motion. We're basically testing this for a year.
Okay.
And you have to make an assumption whether you think this will be a massive draw on our reserves or actually be net revenue positive. I think it's going to be net revenue positive. I don't think there's a huge risk here to the commission.
Okay, Councillor Gower?
Can we get Councillor Gower's microphone, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick point, I'm on the OC Transpo website, and Family Day is already covered as a day for the Family Day Pass, as far as I can tell. So there's one less day. I think given the amount of uncertainty and risk in this budget, what Councillor Brockington is proposing poses such a minuscule amount of risk to the overall budget that we're looking at. It's a completely reasonable proposition, and I think something it's worth trying out to see how it goes, and I'll be supporting his motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Nobody else? Okay, so to be clear, we're not capping this. If there's a lost revenue, we have to find a way to absorb it. Okay. All right, then.
I have a question.
Sure. Councillor Cluche?
Then my question is to finance, how do we pay for this?
You wouldn't build this in your budget. You would just leave your revenue projections exactly as they are. At the end of the year, whatever revenue you've brought in would be, you would dispose of that surplus or deficit at the end of the year. It would just fall to the bottom line. So at that point in time, Mr. Scrimgeour would be able to tell you, hopefully after a year, whether in fact it actually increased the revenue or it decreased the revenue or it had no impact on the revenue.
Is there a lot of cost to tracking this?
Tracking it will not be a cost.
Will not be a cost.
There might be difficulties in extrapolating knowledge from the information we track, however.
But we'll get the number of family passes sold on X days, and that's revenue. Deciding on who did not buy transit tickets those days and were they families will be more difficult.
Knowing who bought the passes and whether they're related to each other will be impossible. We will know that they're traveling together. We will not know how many of them there are on buses under our current procedures. We would know how many people there were on buying tickets at train stations under our current procedures.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's, so everybody has some information on that now. Let's, are we just going to say carried, or are we going yeas and nays? Carried? Okay, carried it is. So the next one is the fare freeze. A question to, I guess the treasurer or perhaps legal will jump in on this. Councillor McKenney's amendment to extend this from 90 days to a full year freeze, are we in a position that we can bank on that money from RTG for the full year to pay for this? Or because the discussion around 90 days was we figured there was at least 90 more days of issues before we're sure it's all settled. So if you could address that for me on the amendment, I would appreciate it.
That is the risk that's introduced by making this for a full year. Mr. Manconi's already said that RTG the performance is trending up, and they are putting significant resources to make certain that these problems don't continue. When they have the service, hopefully within the next 3 to 4 months, to the level that we expect under the contract, we will not be making deductions, and you will not be able to charge them for any kind of mitigation because it's operating perfectly. So there is a lot of risk that the revenue source for this beyond 3 months may not be there.
Legal, did you want to say anything to that? Or?
No, this is being handled by external counsel, but Marian's opinion is sound.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cloutier?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on that, let's say that service is to our expectations as of January 31st. And we have, by the motion, as from Commissioner Tierney, Councillor Tierney, as it is now, that we have a fare freeze to March 31st. What is our expectation of recovering that from the financial performance provisions of the project agreement, again, in a scenario where they are performing as per the contract as of January 31st? How can we recoup that money for February and March in the scenario as the motion now stands?
So we would have to use a different source for February and March, but I think you would have enough from what you have in September, October to cover that. So we would go back to your transit operating reserve if that were the case, if we weren't able to recover it from the provisions within the agreement. We would come back to you at that time to advise you as such that we would be taking it from your transit operating reserve.
There is no such fund or flexibility or marge de manœuvre, if you will, if we have a fare freeze for the whole year.
No, there isn't. If you remember, you've got only 1.5 million in your operating reserve right now, and the cost of a whole year's fare freeze is roughly $5 million.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I guess we vote on the amendment first. The wording for the amendment, sure.
Is the change just 12 months? Is that the change? Yeah, and the amount of 4.9? 4.9, is that what came back? I think so.
I think we shot ourselves in the foot on the blank check one, but that's okay. Yeah, but, well, you know, we raised the questions. We'll see what the mayor wants to do at council on that one, because it's going to impact the budget if it goes bad. If it goes good, it's great. Okay. Yeah, not anymore.
So we don't have a screen over there.
Sorry for the delay, folks. We're just getting some info. Sorry, we're waiting on the amendment. Councillor Brockington wants to read the amendment, so it's up there now. Commissioner Olson, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, the motion actually talks about an anticipated revenue reduction of $4,950. So we have to fix that, I would suggest.
That should be $4,950,000.
Good catch, Commissioner.
Or else I'm all in favor.
Okay, are you good, Councillor Brockington? Okay, is everybody good? You ready to vote? Okay. I doubt it, but yeas and nays on the amendment, please.
Commissioner Brockington,
No.
Commissioner Caracato,
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Gower,
No.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Commissioner McKinney,
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
No.
Commissioner Suds,
No.
Commissioner Tierney,
No.
Commissioner Wright Gilbert,
Yes.
Commissioner Cloutier,
No.
and Chair Hubley.
No.
Seven nays, 4 yeas.
Okay, so the amendment fails. Now we'll vote on the motion itself. Is that carried, or do we want yeas and nays? Carried. Carried? Great, thank you all. Oh, Councillor Brockington. Dissent. Okay, Councillor Brockington's dissenting on the motion. Okay, so with that is the report, sorry, roadmap motion. Thank you. Yep, please.
Just reminding the roadmap motion for the report. Do I need to read it again? No. User fees, pages 4 to 6, operating resources, page 3, capital budget, page 7 and 8.
Is that motion carried?
That's the whole budget.
Dissent? Two dissents on the budget? Okay. Sorry, that was the roadmap.
This is for the whole budget, yes.
Dissent? So 3 dissents on the budget. Okay. Thank you all. So now, let's see.
What is she talking about?
Yeas and nays? Okay, sorry. Yeas and nays on the budget then, please, Clerk. Okay, point of order on the yeas and nays.
Just a clarification, the first dissent I had, my understanding that was the vote on the budget. I am not dissenting on a 3-month fare freeze, so I want that changed, okay?
You're
So
not?
I
Okay.
support the 3-month fare freeze. I want to vote in favor. My dissent was for the budget.
Legal, do we have to do reconsideration, or can we just accept that?
No, that's fine.
Oh, thank you.
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
there
but
you go, Councillor Brockington.
I wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that. Thank you.
Okay, so, so then the fair freeze goes through with 1 dissent, is that correct? Or 2? No dissents. Okay. Okay, so we're back to catching up to the budget. The amendment to the budget, so that we're clear on the record. That went down. That was 8 to 4, you said on the amendment, I believe? On the McKinney amendment, to be clear. So that's failed. Now, the budget itself, we're going to do as amended. What's the amendment? Sorry. Okay. So, yeas and nays, the roadmap, which is, as the clerk just explained, will be the vote on the budget itself. So did somebody say yeas and nays on the roadmap? Okay, Councillor McKinney's called for yeas and nays on the roadmap. Mr. Clerk.
Commissioner Brockington,
No.
Commissioner Caracato,
Yes.
Commissioner Gower,
No.
Commissioner Olson,
Yes.
Commissioner Suds,
Yes.
Commissioner Tierney,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright Gilbert,
No.
Commissioner Cloutier,
We.
and Chair Hubley.
Yes.
8 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, thank you. So report's carried. Now, the status. Okay, so no in-camera items, notices of motion. Any notices? We're good. Inquiries? None? Oh,
Put it on the screen so you
oh,
know.
thank you.
Sorry. So I just have one. I'm asking staff to review and provide the Transit Commission with the operational and financial implications of extending the transfer validity period from the current 90 minutes to 120 minutes. And I've sent the text to Chris.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Any other inquiries? No? Oh, Councillor Kavanaugh? No? Okay, so can we have a motion to adjourn then, please? Oh, we're good? Okay, thank you all.